OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, a very good morning to you. It is Wednesday. I'm going to check the date, the 7th of June. You're very welcome along to OTB AM, and it's just gone 7:30. We've got a full house for you this morning. Shane Hannon is here. Shane. Good morning. Kathleen McNamee is here. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
We're all about the mergers today. We're talking about LIV Golf and the PGA Tour. I mean, who didn't see this coming? What? How could we not have suspected that the money would convince the money-grabbingest sport in the world to grab the money? I mean, more fool us for not really predicting that ultimately the PGA Tour is getting what it wants, which is loads of money. And all the golfers are going to get more money. What first convinced you to fall in love with these Saudi billionaires?
I do wonder.
I didn't see it coming though. I have to say.
I thought it was coming. I just didn't think it was coming quite so soon. I thought it would be a bit more of a protracted process, but it seems like Jay Monaghan just kind of took the reins and decided, no, not doing this anymore, lads.
He's a man of action, Jay Monaghan. A titan of capitalism.
I know I told you all before that I wasn't going to do this, but guess what? Got 3 of my buddies in a room. Amanda Stavely,
it sounds
the
like
PIF.
They played a bit of golf in London and they had some nice meals in Venice.
Sure they did. According
to details in the Financial Times. I can only imagine the quality of the meals that they're having.
Oh.
Food
I haven't even heard of. Can't pronounce.
22 courses.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to
ortolans on a stick.
Certain forks like in Titanic at that time in the movie.
But maybe not all that satisfying as well. Sometimes I find those fancier meals, they're just a bit like...
You can't have a burger afterwards.
That is true. That is true.
Chips on the way home. It's disgusting and it's disgraceful and it's humiliating for the players that decided not to take the carrot.
Is it?
It is, of course
Why?
it is.
Why?
Because they are left now with a gaping...
They're left now with their own moral authority, no?
No, that's true, but it's still...
I hear everybody telling me, oh, he's been humiliated. Oh, Rory, he's been humiliated. Like, Rory stood up for what he believed in, and I think still has his credibility.
He does.
Is that not better?
There's a reason there was anger in that room yesterday at that meeting at the Canadian Open.
But there is also the side as well that he's come out and said I've been given reassurances that this isn't going to happen, and that is when you've when you've been the public facing at the time when everyone else in the PGA didn't want to stand up and be the public face of this. He did, and he was I've been reassured that it's all fine. I totally agree, it's not humiliating what he did because he has his credibility and he has every moral authority in this situation, but I could understand how you'd be standing there being this is a bit embarrassing and annoying.
You know the Tucker Carlson figure in Succession who is in every episode whenever they want to make him look like Tucker Carlson, and he's oh, I'm going to leak all this stuff and I'm going to embarrass you, and Shiv is we don't get embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Rory McIlroy should not be embarrassed by doing the right thing here. A lot of people are going to say ha ha ha, but the people who are pointing fingers at Rory, I'm sure he feels let down. I'm sure he feels betrayed. I'm sure he feels like somebody just broke up an engagement with him by text message. Now he understands how other people might feel in other circumstances. But he did the right thing. He stood up for what he believed in.
He did.
Well, he was surrounded by golfers. That was his original sin here, is being surrounded by golfers and the people in golf who are just interested in making as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's the whole language around this that just gets me. When you listen to Jay Monaghan talking about the 9/11 links, 15 of the 19 hijackers being Saudi and all the rest, and then he turns around and says things like he said yesterday. The statement was just remarkable. And I understand that LIV were struggling for sponsors and they couldn't get on American television, but the PGA deciding to do this merger is just complete greed and money. There's nothing else involved here. It's as black and white.
No, it's to grow the game, Shane. They're going to grow the game. The game will be bigger because of this, Shane.
I applaud PIF Governor Yasser Al-Rumayyan for his vision and collaborative and forward-thinking approach. This is Jay Monaghan yesterday.
Well, you do have to take your hats off to whoever in Saudi Arabia decided 10 years ago we're going to take over the world sport, and then they just did it. They were okay. I mean, their plan is working.
It's an incredible show of power. Like when you think of the sort of bodies and the money that's going around that they're taking, like was it 2 billion they've spent on the LIV Tour just to get players to come over, and now they're just all going back.
And what happens to the money? Like there must have been some.
Like, do the players still get this money? Like, was it?
I don't
you get
know.
like a 200 million lump sum?
I'm
or
dying to know
is
that.
it you
I
get
am dying. Yeah,
paid out over time.
Exactly. You'd think it would be like, we're going to give you 500 million, but it's going to be 50 million every year for 10 years. So you suspect that there's a break clause in the contract that if they rejoin the PGA Tour, you'll get a certain amount of that, but it'll be a lesser amount. Or maybe those contracts are just they all get rolled in, and all the golfers who went. And that's why they are laughing at McIlroy. I still think McIlroy did the right thing.
No, he definitely did the right thing.
Like, I don't think there's like any argument about that from this side of the room. Anyways.
How do these LIV players get reintegrated now? These are players that were told they would never play on the PGA Tour again, and now all of a sudden it's like, well,
when you look at how brazen they all were yesterday, whenever the news broke, I don't think they're going to have any problems reintegrating themselves. In fact, I fully expect them to be walking around various different courses, laughing at everyone.
Jesus,
just being like that. I thought you weren't going to see me again.
Donald Trump on his whatever social media platform he uses in his capital letters now. Great news from LIV Golf. A big, beautiful and glamorous deal for the wonderful world of golf. Congrats to all. So of course he has been critical of the PGA Tour in recent years. Had his championship taken away from him, wasn't it, in 2022 in New Jersey?
Yeah, well, he'll get that back now.
Yeah, this is the thing, like, it's Turnberry he owns. They'll probably get the Open in the next few years now as well.
Yeah, maybe Doombeg is going to get one of those events.
And it's a lack of communication as well. Like Mackenzie Hughes tweeting yesterday, we found out through Twitter this is a joke. Like,
well, you can't be telling everybody about a deal that's going on if it's like you can't blab. In fairness, I would say that's a strength of the organisation, their ability to get the stuff done. Like,
is it a strength, or is it the fact that it was like Monaghan and like 2 or 3 other PGA people? Like, when you keep it that close,
could you tell them an hour or two before? Like, finding out on Twitter isn't great.
What difference does it make?
It affects their jobs and livelihoods.
Yeah, they're going to get more money, and they'll all be like, they are going to get more money. Like, I don't know. You can't tell everybody everything. I don't think you can bring like a 200 tour golfers and their entourages and their agents.
But I
and
do
their managers.
think, you can't bring everyone in on something, but I do think there's a level of respect that you owe players, that they at least get a heads up before the general public. I don't think that's too much for someone to expect in that situation. If it's a random email that drops and it's an absolute bombshell and you're like, oh my God, that's one thing. But if you're finding out and you're seeing it just like rolling through Sky Sports or CNN or whatever news you're watching, I don't think that's fair. I think that shows complete disrespect to the players, even more so than they were already showing.
Sorry, to say that the sports washing does not work, is anyone that out there the argument now that the sports washing doesn't work? Like,
I don't think anybody's making that a case, though, are they?
But the fact that things in Saudi Arabia have actually got worse in the last year or two since all this kicked off, since LIV kicked off, they're still chopping people's heads off with swords. Like, if anything, things have got worse in Saudi Arabia since all this started.
There's an interesting comment in here on the YouTube from Keane Rowe, who's listening from Dubai. And he says, over this side of the world, there's a palpable feeling they're ramping up their efforts and becoming a superpower. Their wealth is scary.
It's just terrifying. Like, the figures involved here. Like, and we don't actually know the figures involved, but we just know that they're
3 billion is the figure quoted in the FT today. But again, like, we do need the 60,000 word. This is what I pay my €2 a month to the Athletic for. Finally, for them. I don't know if they've got anybody in the background who can deliver the inside story of exactly how the deal was done. Don't worry, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to take credit for this deal who will be letting details leach out in the coming days. Big Phil won't be able to shut his mouth.
He's delighted. Like Rory McIlroy obviously will I think he's due to speak later on today. Padraig Harrington had a few interesting comments on Twitter yesterday. So first of all, he was saying, surprised that this merger has happened so quickly, but not surprised it's happened. Definitely in the financial interest of both sides, definitely in the financial interest of the players, even though some of those who gain will feel like they're losing. Good for the cohesion of global golf. And then the reaction started pouring into what Harrington was saying, and he went slightly further. People will have seen this perhaps this morning, but looking at some of the replies, he said, "I'm trying to explain why this has happened. It's hard to overcome the financial business side of life when you're representing a group with many different backgrounds and morals. My own country," he said, "sells military technology to Saudi Arabia. So many other compromises. Yes, this is sports washing, and yes, unfortunately it proves sports washing works, but maybe one positive, inclusion and trade is shown to improve and change countries involved for the better. My own country," speaking about Ireland, "thought it was acceptable to lock up unmarried mothers as late as 1996, which I thought was a strange comparison. I mean, when you're comparing one bad country to one other country's bad moves at a certain time, I think you're onto a loser.
Are you? Why?
Well, like, yeah.
Did it not happen?
Well,
Is it not true?
Of course, we talk about the mother and baby homes all the time in this country, and rightly we should.
But we don't talk about it. We roll it into a ball and push it deep inside
Catholic
us.
guilt, yes, of course.
And nothing. It'll never resurface again. And we betray them by not giving them enough. We have not made reparation for the evil that we did as a society. And he's just going like, look, this is a complicated situation. I thought it was interesting that he brought it up, and I think it shows a level of reflection which I wasn't sure was there.
Well, it's probably something that people had.
And he points out that it is sports washing.
And he did also say that he didn't negotiate.
I think that, like, I
thought it was kind of interesting because it was probably the most detailed response I saw by anyone in the golf world who was actually still
a Ryder Cup captain, like, still competitive on the seniors tour. You know, like,
you could almost see the like rise and dips in his own, where he was like, I can see this side of it. I can also see that side. And it was almost like he was speaking as he was thinking through it.
I saw loads of people criticising him and similarly like, oh, you can't bring up it's whataboutery. It's like, okay, yeah, but all of life is whataboutery. Like, they're like describing something as whataboutery does not suddenly mean that you can't have a conversation about. Obviously, there are massive differences in the global strength that Ireland has versus Saudi Arabia, and obviously every situation is unique. But
I think the criticism is coming because it's tough to compare horrible things. Like, you can't power rank horrific things that happen. You know, and I think that's what the sense that people were getting.
American foreign policy has resulted essentially in the situation that we have in the Middle East at the moment. 1 million people were killed in Iraq on the most flimsy pretenses ever. 1 million people died in the war in Iraq, and as a result of that, we have the incredible instability that we have. Iraq has not recovered and is unlikely to recover for multi-generations, and you know, like, the whole notion that somehow America is this bastion of we should do business with them. Like, British security forces operated under a shoot to kill policy on our island. Mm-hmm. We don't care about that when it comes to doing business with UK companies. So, like, this isn't they're our current bogeyman, but actually, you know, in 10 years' time we'll decide they're not the bogeyman and we'll move on to something else. Like, I do feel like there's a subtlety and a nuance to what Harrington is saying on Twitter about golf, which is maybe difficult to I don't feel like I can criticise Pádraig Harrington this morning because he's making points about, like, look, this is a really complicated situation. The deal was always going to happen because everybody wanted more money, and the more money is coming. Personally, I turned down the money. I'm like, good man, Pádraig. That's my takeaway from this. And I think that you can absolutely hold a mirror up to ourselves and go, well, how great are we? How great are we? Like, with this misogynistic society which we've had, which we presided over, which we wrestled back, and then we handed it straight over to the church in Fianna Fáil for like 80 years, and we're slowly chiseling it away. Like, that's what I think, you know?
I know. No,
we're great lads here, aren't we?
No,
we're not great lads.
And sorry, I should say I'm not criticising Pádraig Harrington. I actually, like, his comments are thought provoking. It's just that, yeah, where does the line stop? You can't talk about, like, British government colluded to blow up my hometown of Monaghan in 1974. Do you know? Like, but where does this stop? Like, where do you then start talking about the Open and Irish participation? Like, there's such a grey area, and that's the scary thing about this as well, that the line between sport and current affairs and news and politics has narrowed to the point now where it's completely impossible to tell them apart. Like, sports washing has worked, and it feels like on this show and on Off the Ball in the evenings as well for the last 3 or 4 years we've been talking about politics nearly more than sport.
You don't think the college football game coming to Ireland is sports washing, do you? Or is it?
Like, it's not, but, like, is it? Yeah, that's the question. Like, and I don't think anyone thinks that like America are the world police and are the bastions of all that is good.
Is the whole thing about sports washing though, and not like when you're trying to make the definition, the difference between like a state deciding that they're going to like buy up some of the most popular sports and most popular sporting teams to like make themselves seem more palatable on a global scale, different to the acts of like individuals within sport?
I would say yeah, and
like that would be, for me, that would be the difference between like college teams coming over here.
I think that
sorry, just to finish, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that like it's been an absolute failure of like Western media, Western policies over the last couple of years, that we don't look at the America in the same way that we view, like you look at what's happened to people who are fleeing like various different crises across South America, which are all propped up by American governments, like all that sort of stuff. I do think that everything that's going on with abortion, everything that's going on with rights for women, for LGBT people, like it's insane what's going on, and I think we should be having more conversations about that, and we should be having more conversations about like American companies investing in things. But also, again, it's individuals and it's companies, and to me that's different to like a state investment in and a targeted attempt to make yourself seem better on a global scale.
I agree with you, but I also think, and Ger, your point as well about holding the mirror up, like Qatar World Cup, we talked about it on air from a footballing perspective. We engaged perhaps in sports washing, as did every other news and sports organisation in this country and in many other countries. Like, should we have done that? Like, I can't answer that question. Do you know? But Qatar is a state that have horrific human rights themselves and rights for women, and yet we engaged in talking about the sport. So I don't know where this ends. Like, and I don't know what the right answer is. And that's the point, and that's probably why you're right about Padraig Harrington's bringing this up, that there is no right answer or wrong answer. Clearly what's happening in Saudi Arabia is wrong, but I do understand your point that Padraig Harrington is probably holding up a mirror and just saying, well, look, none of us are perfect.
I think the point about the individual versus the state is well made. I would suggest though that like the sports washing started with the Olympics and, you know, obviously famously the Nazis in Berlin, and then America versus the USSR in their proxy on the Olympic fields, where athletes were doped on both sides and blind eyes were turned, and all that anybody wanted was the medal race. But I think that maybe the I know we're getting deep in the weeds here, but the system of American capitalism is the American identity, and so I think it's not a massive leap to say that like a company investment or the buying by rich Americans, the plutocrats who control the society essentially and who decide who is fit to stand and who's going to get enough money to be able to run an election campaign, like that's just the way they wield their power. The way the Saudi Arabians are wielding their power is they're taking money from the ground in the form of oil, and they're hoarding the oil, controlling the value of it, and then making loads of money and then buying assets with it, and the world, it has to decide whether or not it's going to stay fascinated with and wedded to the oil that's coming from the ground, because that's giving the power to the people who are buying the football clubs and buying the golf tours and whatever comes next. Like, you know, you've got to assume that the entertainment industry, the drinks industry, the travel industry, like, you know, well, it's
basically every industry going, apart from anything that's based on something green. But the other thing as well, and I think sometimes with especially American clubs and teams, because there's maybe been a bit more of a backlash to it, especially in recent years, is that it's almost easier on an individual level to get angry about like what a certain team or a certain club stands for, or issues with, say, who their owners support, whether it's politically or what like religious or political ideals they support, whereas it's harder to go up against an entire state in that way as well, if they have control over a team or if they have control over an entire league. I mean, you look at, say, the NFL and the difficulties there's even been there with some of the political stances and with the people that they're funding on a scale, like, but it still seems slightly easier than going up and against an entire state. I know the point you're making, and I do agree that it's not a massive leap, but in my head there is still an individuality to those two things, and maybe that's a case of needing, because like sports washing is not a term that's been in our vocabulary for all that long, even though it probably should have been. It's like one of those many terms that we now have to describe phenomena that we think are new but actually aren't at all. So like maybe it is just a case of widening that definition, but for me, in my head at the moment, it still is a little different. Fair
enough. I would say they're on a spectrum. And like, again, if we had an hour, we could get into a bit more details. At 7:49 though, we've got to talk about the bombshell in Love Island. That's a natural segue for us, right?
What a beautiful segue.
Wow. Sports washing to Love Island. Yeah.
Well, it's all the big stories all the time.
Yeah, it's true.
On OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. So I would like to open the kimono a bit here and explain. Shane asked a question in the pre-show meeting. So what is a bombshell, hey?
Yeah.
What was your question?
What is a bombshell?
No, it wasn't. There was something. I've screwed it up here.
Was that my question?
What's the difference?
The question was
what is it that makes a bombshell a bombshell?
How do you become a bombshell? How does one, if one wants to become a bombshell?
Hey, well, we're getting to the truth of the question now.
How does one become one? I love that. I'd love to put that in my LinkedIn, stick it on my CV.
You're too old now, aren't you?
Missing for a couple of weeks.
This is an ageist show, as far as I'm.
Is there an age limit?
Presume so.
I think everyone tends to be younger than me, and I am 26.
Okay, that's fine. I'm slightly north of that, so maybe it's Love Island days are behind me. So a Love Island or a League of Ireland footballer, apparently on the fringes of maybe not one of the top teams. That's all the information that we're getting.
Doesn't this happen in Ted Lasso?
Does it, right?
It does, yeah.
See,
well, like they do get footballers quite a lot from like lower league leagues in England.
There is one.
It's quite common.
Yeah, they're like
or like lower tier rugby players as well. Quite common.
Yeah, Greg O'Shea was a course in rugby. He was in Love Island, wasn't he?
Yeah, although to be fair, he was with the actual sevens team.
Fair.
So I probably shouldn't call him a lower tier because that would be unfair.
But yeah, it's a bombshell. It's bombshell news for this bombshell heading to the Villa. So apparently, the question was answered for me by you, Kathleen. I think that the bombshell is someone who's lumped in the middle of the show after a couple of people have come and gone to cause chaos and disruption and get with people.
I will also say I don't actually watch Love Island. It's just one of those things that you kind of hear in the
grapevine.
Yeah,
you don't need to do that. If you watch it, it's fine. There'll be no shaming here.
No, because I actually, it's a more serious point, but I have my issues with the show and like the premises of it and the fact that it's always like straight couples, the fact that they've had to like basically ban everyone that goes on it off social media because their care policy for looking after contenders is so horrendous and so many people have suffered afterwards, and also the fact that none of them actually really get any money for when they're in there, and then they come out and they
it's PR move.
It's a moral stance.
Fair enough.
Moral
Okay.
stance.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do judge people who watch it.
Well, you shouldn't.
Sorry for anyone out there who watches, because I know sometimes you have to switch off your brain.
I love reality TV. Like I'd watch it all day long. It's probably my guilty pleasure.
Some of the smartest people I know watch the shitest TV.
Are you calling me smart, Shane?
Yeah, well, you're a smart person, and my sister Laura is a smart person as well, and she watches these sorts of crap shows. Joe Malloy was famously, or perhaps infamously, in this office on News Talk talking about his love of Love Island a couple of years ago. I don't know if he still watches it. I'll not speak on his behalf. But,
so you get to kind of shut your brain off for a little while, and you don't have to think, and you're getting involved in someone else's. It's like the whole thing of like the culture of people who used to watch like YouTube vlogs where you just watch someone go out their average day.
You not just go for a walk without your phone, maybe?
Well, you used to be able to watch sport like that, but now, unfortunately, you have to access the part of your brain that also is the political side of it.
Yes.
As you watch
morals.
The tennis, like the tennis is festooned with Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and Novak Djokovic. It's like, so we used to be an oasis, not anymore. 7:53 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Tommy Walsh is standing by to talk hurling. Dr. Katie Liston and Conor Meyler have produced a piece of work about the merger between the LGFA, the Camogie Association, and the GAA. We're going to talk to them at 8:30. We are going to get back to the LIV story with Riath Al-Samarrai at around about 8:50. Vinny Perth's going to join us in studio at 9:10, and then some Gaelic football analysis from Colin Boyle and Darren O'Sullivan at 9:30 this morning. If you've got comments, we'd love to hear from you. Was there anything else that we need? London Irish at the moment and not coming back. So this is the story. A couple of years ago, they were in Reading in the Medeski Stadium. They broke their contract to move back to the Brentford Stadium, which was kind of closer to their original fan base, and they'd built a best-in-class training ground, but they didn't obviously have a stadium. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and when the pandemic hit, they had to play matches behind closed doors, even though they'd invested loads of money in players. One specific contract is being held up as an example of the bad business they did, but it seems to be blaming that one player who took a really good deal that was offered to him by London Irish, and then they had debts of 30 million to the point where their owner was willing to give it away so long as you would take over the debt. They couldn't find anybody to take over the 30 million debt, and they've gone to the wall, and that's the end of London Irish, which is a storied rugby club, multi-generations, a haven for Irish people in London back in the 70s and 80s particularly. One of the first places that when the game went professional, a load of Irish players went over and played for, and now it's just gone. And that's it.
Sad day for London Irish, sad day for rugby. Does feel like all the stories this morning are depressing people. Just for another one to throw into the mix as well, absolute mad night overnight in World Snooker as well. This was coming. 2 Chinese players, Liang Wenbo and Li Hang, lifetime bans, will never play the sport again in a professional capacity, and 8 other players from China receiving bans ranging from 20 months to 5 years and 4 months. This is for cheating, essentially, manipulating games, approaching players to cheat, betting on snooker matches, and fixing matches. And these aren't just small fish. Like Yan Bingqiao was the Masters champion a couple of years ago. He's been banned until 2027. And then Zhao Jintong, UK championship winner, recently enough, will be suspended until 2024. So it's all positive, lads, isn't it, this morning? In terms of world
sport. On the London Irish one as well, we will actually have one of the players on the show tomorrow to talk about the experience of being there. Hugh O'Sullivan, played with Leinster, went over to Newcastle and then went to London Irish, so he's actually been at the cold face of all this the last couple of weeks and understands what it was like to not know if you're going to get your wages paid or not. So yeah, should be a really interesting chat with him tomorrow.
Quick run through the headlines for a minute before we get to Tommy Walsh. The brilliant front cover on the Irish Examiner this morning: Forever Soaring, GA heartbroken at sudden passing of Cork legend Teddy McCarthy. And it is the prototypical picture of Teddy McCarthy, both hands on the Gaelic football, high above the Meath footballers. So that's from one of the All-Ireland finals that they would have played in, against, obviously, as famously we know now, the only man to win a hurling and football All-Ireland on the field of play in the same year. Back page of the Star: Pep City have big dreams. He says they need to win to become a big club. He says he's also has screwed up in Champions League finals and big games in the Champions League before, so a bit of reflection from him. Kylie Home Sweet Home, he's delighted to be playing in the Gaelic grounds. Again, Tommy Walsh standing by, we'll talk to him in a moment. Greenpeace shock as Saudis swoop to end golf's civil war. Yeah. Will Sergio and Rory be teammates again in the Ryder Cup at some point? All those details have to be ironed out. And Declan Rice, we can join the Immortals at West Ham. That's basically a picture of Teddy hurling this time against Galway. So I don't know if that's the 86 final maybe. That's the 1990 final. Celtic's rising star Vata committed to Ireland. Crawford, this is Jim Crawford telling us, don't worry. Rocco Vata, very good. Rudy Vata's son, available to play for Scotland, Albania, Montenegro, and of course the Republic of Ireland. No, it's fine. He definitely, he's not going. Don't worry about it. And that is, there's a picture of Jack Grealish on the top of the Independent, and look who that is, Declan Rice.
Oh yeah, great.
So one of the headlines saying that David Moyes and Declan Rice can become legends of the game if they win tonight, and I was like,
Europa Conference League, a tournament that did not exist a few years ago.
I'm not doing it down in that. I think, your teams at certain levels, but this is making me sound like I'm doing myself down, but it's good to get to a final, it's good to compete, but I don't know, was winning today going to make them a legend of the game?
I think for West Ham to win a European trophy is a big deal.
Moyes has never won a European trophy as well.
Yeah, it does transform how people talk about your career. We'll come back to this a little bit later on. It's 7:58. It is time for the cash machine.
Off the balls cash machine.
So May was an absolutely huge month for the cash machine. 15 lucky winners and some winning life-changing amounts of cash. Mick in Wexford won 75 grand. Frank in Dublin won 50. Liz also in Wexford won an incredible 81,000 euro. The sunny southeast. The winning showing no signs of slowing down. This week somebody could win a cool 60 grand heading into summer. It's easy to take part. We're going to give you an amount. You take note of it. You enter. If we call you and you give us the number, you win that cash. You've got to answer within 5 rings though. This week on the cash machine, we're giving away a very easy number to remember, 60,000 euro exactly. So just write down 60,000. To enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. If it's you that we call back after 3 o'clock on Friday, June the 9th, you answer your phone within 5 rings and tell us the prize amount and you win the money. Text OTB to 57557. The cost is $2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Full terms are on our website at offtheball.com. 60,000 euros exactly is the number. We're back after these.
Off the Ball's cash machine.
Toe pocket goal! Ahead of this summer's football in Australia. We're going to Australia.
It's what dreams are made of.
We'll be hosting a night of celebration for the Republic of Ireland women's national team in partnership with Sky, and it's coming your way on June 28th in the Mansion House in Dublin. What a moment for the Republic of Ireland. We'll be joined by the full squad.
I don't know what we've just done. You know, I did believe we could do it.
As well as some other great guests as we give the team a night to remember. Emma Byrne is in tears.
I can't believe it. We've finally done it.
Tune in to all of Off the Ball's channels for a chance to win tickets to this exclusive event.
Sky, proud primary partners of the Republic of Ireland women's national team.
Out-believe together and we can go anywhere.
They are going to the World Cup Finals!
Can we stick on O'Carroll there for a second, because I think this could be interesting coming from you. When he broke on initially, like he was that type of player coming up underage, that kind of target man, sharpshooter. Sorry, not a target man, but that guy that would get you the points and the scores. But we know that Roscommon have the Mertens, the Smiths that can do it. You obviously would have changed your game as a forward for Dublin as the years went on. That's a really impressive thing, that at that age Ben O'Carroll has been able to change his game to suit intercounty football, what his manager needs now.
It's partly from him, but I'm sure it's from the coaches as well. I was a great scorer in the club championship as well, Tommy.
Well, believe it.
Loads of good players like that, but he's not being asked to do that.
Yeah.
You can see, and in terms of, is he a better shooter than either of Mertens? No, he's not. But the role he plays in the team, it's what we're talking about, complementary forwards. It's why Ian Burke is so important for Galway, that he, again, part of choice isn't turning around to him going, score 10 points. Jim Gavin used to say to me, he goes, I don't need you to score 5-6 points from play. We have other guys who'll do that, but I need you to do this. I need you to get out to that ball, because we want to move the ball up the pitch quickly. And you can see it with Ben O'Carroll. He'd be a nightmare to mark.
Yeah.
But they give him the licence. Everyone else comes back and it's like, you just stay up there. It's a great role to have, lads. Like, you don't need to tackle back, because if we turn these over, we're going to launch it to you, and then you just need to hold it up away for the cavalry to arrive. But that's a team. That's a clear tactic. The player needs to understand it. He needs to have the ability to do it. The coach needs to see it, and the other players need to buy into it. And that's what you see from Roscommon.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Yeah, in the outbreak there, you heard a clip from the Football Pod where Paddy James and Tommy talked about just how good they think Ben O'Carroll can be. The Football Pod is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the Football, Hurling and Camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. Now, I'm excited about this. We get to preview the two finals, the Munster and Leinster Hurling finals, with Tommy Walsh. Tommy, good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, lads.
Before we get into
like a great morning, like looking forward to these two provincials. Like, how many times, Ger, have we said, is this the best hurling year ever? And it seems like we're saying that again. Like, what a Munster Championship so far. I know that the Leinster Championship, I suppose, it's been probably in the shadows, but the Munster Championship has been phenomenal so far this year. And go down to the Gaelic grounds now for kind of a home Munster final for Limerick to try and do the 5 in a row.
Yeah. In retrospect, I wonder, will Clare think maybe we shouldn't have given them the home field for the 5 in a row?
Yeah, listen, I suppose there's many ways of looking at it, but in recent times anyway, I suppose Clare have, positive experience, I suppose, in the Gaelic grounds, which was only a few weeks ago against Limerick. And there's not too many teams with positive experiences against Limerick. I was looking at the results since Brian Lohan came on board, And if you go back to, he came on board in late 2019, 2020 they went to Thurles, Limerick Hammer Clare. 22 then, they didn't play each other in 21. 22 then, they went to Ennis, it was a draw. 22, they went to Thurles for the Munster final. Limerick have won. So, and this year in the Gaelic rounds. So their only positive experiences really have been either in Ennis or in the Gaelic rounds. So why not? And Brian Lohan is fearless. And the way a manager is, or the leader of your pack is, usually the rest will follow. And they've followed him since probably 93, 94 when things weren't going so well. Turned it around, they did in that Munster final in 1995 and went on and achieved legendary status. And he was probably, the main leader of that team. There's many leaders on that team, but he was definitely one of them. And I'd say they would follow this lad to the ends of the earth. And if he says, let's go to the Gaelic rounds and beat Limerick, and like they're going for history, I'd say they will just to take the hand and all off him. And I don't think whether they win or lose, I don't think this will really matter, because they didn't beat him in Thurles either, didn't beat him anywhere else. So why not try and go down? Like John Conlon is closer to the Gaelic rounds than he is to Ennis. So listen, I'd say go down, take him on and see where it goes.
I think the other thing is that the ticket should be 50-50, so it's not a traditional home game. It's a home venue and the advantage of that home venue, but the other big advantage is that the supporters are always they're supposed to outnumber the away supporters. In this case, that shouldn't be the case, because it's technically it's a Munster fixture as opposed to a Limerick fixture, so that dilutes the advantage a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I suppose have Limerick kept a few tickets in the drawer inside some office. You wouldn't find any fault in that either, really, because that's the whole crack of it. But I was down at the game in the round robin, and that was, I suppose, a home fixture for Limerick. It didn't feel like it, in regards to supporters. It felt like there was many Clare supporters there as there was Limerick, because you can't beat a derby, Ger. Kind of form, players, confidence, everyone goes out the window for a derby. It's pure tension, pure pressure, pure nerves that you just, it's like an All-Ireland final, really. Every derby game you play in, it's the same intensity, same pressure, same, I suppose, bragging rights stat on the line here. And if you can, hurl in a derby or hurl in an All-Ireland final, you can hurl anywhere. And they're the players that we'll see step up, I suppose, on Sunday. It's usually the greats step up. And, looking at Limerick, it's getting nearer and nearer now to these records that we spoke of earlier on in the year. I was looking at they're going for the 5 in a row. The only team other than Limerick, Ger, to do this has been Cork. 3 times they've done it: 01 to 05, 1975 to 79, 1982 to 86. All the great players, great managers have done this. No other team in Munster has done it. People will go back to the team of the 40s, the 4-0 All-Ireland winning team. They didn't even win the 5 Munsters because the foot and mouth hit in 1941, and they beat Cork beat Limerick. And they were supposed to play Tipperary, but Tipperary and Kilkenny weren't allowed in because of the foot and mouth. So they played Limerick to see who go on and play Dublin in the All-Ireland final. They went on and won. This is with Jack Lynch and Christy Ring and the lads. They went on and won the All-Ireland final. But they came back then in October when the restrictions eased off, and Tipperary bet them in the Munster final. So there's amazing history involved in this match Sunday that they might be talking about in 40, 50 years' time. The All-Ireland winning or the Munster winning managers, top of that list, Justin McCarthy with 6. It's brilliant. Justin would have managed in our time, with Watford, and before that with Cork. After that, then it was Bertie Try has 5 and Babs Keaton, and then you're down to our man now, John Kiley. He's down with 4, and Canon O'Brien in Cork. So if Kiley wins as manager this weekend, he goes up to 5 to join Bertie Try and Babs. It's amazing stuff. And I was interested to see then the players. So if the Limerick players go on and win 5, many of them will win 5 this weekend. The record is 10, and I was looking at them. John Doyle, Hell's Kitchen, the great Tipperary team with the 60, he is 10. Jimmy Barry Murphy is 10. These are legendary hurlers that speak of in different eras, different decades. Down then you have 9, you have Christy Ring, Jimmy Doyle, Charlie McCarthy, the great Charlie McCarthy, Gerald McCarthy, Ray Cummins, Johnny Crowley, and then 3 lads are on 8 with Donnie Neal and Tom Casham and Dermot McCurtain. So like if these lads win 5, they're suddenly closer again to these amazing numbers. And and Clare are going to go down to that backyard and they're probably the best equipped team to take them on at this present time, Ger.
The Clare team this year versus the team last year that got so close to them, it feels like everybody is available and playing well at the same time, which very rarely happens. And I'm sure there are some players who are slightly off their absolute peak, but largely it seems like we've arrived in a situation where, from Clare's perspective, this is as good a shot as they're ever going to have.
It is, because to beat kind of the champions like this, you need good forwards, and this Clare team has good forwards. You have Shane O'Donnell, you have Rogers, you have the great Tony Kelly, obviously Peter Duggan. So Dave Fitzgerald, Tamar Kyle Hayes, they have the forwards to take on this Limerick team. And we spoke about before the championship started. Does anybody have, I suppose, the blueprint to take on this Limerick team? And in fairness to Waterford in the first game, they probably showed how to get at them, and that was you had to go up and mark their defenders. The Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey's, but especially the half back line of Diarmaid Burns, Kyle Hayes and Declan Hannon, I suppose Barry Nash as well, where these guys that were as good on the ball as most guys' best forwards. And most teams up to now have been going with spare defenders or midfielders holding them back. Whereas Waterford went up and took them on at the far end of the field. So they're definitely the best team that we have seen, best defenders we've seen to come out with the ball in transition and not lose it. And they went on, didn't give them the chance to do that. Nearly beat them, probably should have beaten them in the first round. And then Clare took them on down the Gaelic grounds, and I watched, there was so many times in that game where Gillan and Seamus Flanagan were in on their own with 60 yards of space, 2 of them versus 2 Clare defenders. Many people would say that's a high risk, but was it not high risk going the other way, where everybody had been beaten by Limerick? So I think you're right. I think this Clare team, in the form they're in and the players they have now, this is the best chance to beat Limerick.
Tommy, would you expect Clare to adopt a similar enough game plan to that game at the Gaelic Grounds the last time out, or is it adapt or die against this Limerick team?
Yeah, you see, I think the biggest challenge, I think they'll go with the same, Shane, because I think it's the only way to beat Limerick, because you just can't let Burns. We've seen Burns in the last couple of games, man of the match, scoring 3 and 4 points from play. We've seen what Kyle Hayes has done in probably second halves of games where he was given that bit of freedom up. He goes up and down the line and he's clearing loads of ball. You have to go up beside him so that when the ball breaks, it's a 50-50, and it's up to you to fight to win that ball, like most championship games are won, up to probably this Limerick team came on board where it was mostly possession. But I think to beat them you have to go back, so I think they definitely will do that, Shane. The biggest challenge for them though is, as I said, Gillan and Flanagan are inside. They're the 2 Limerick forwards that have never, their curve has never went down. They've been nearly on an upward curve since the league. Whereas most of the other Limerick players probably have been, searching for that bit of form and searching for that bit of confidence. Well, if the 2 of them are inside, I'd say it was probably Rory Hayes was inside on Flanagan. But Flanagan played very well that day. He scored 2-1. But on Gillan is probably the marquee guy, and Cleary was on him, Conor Cleary, and he went off with a bad shoulder injury, in one of the last games. So it's going to be tough. I think they're going to be up against it. Whether Cleary's playing or not, it's a physical game, and if he's a shoulder injury, it wasn't that long ago, I think they will find it tough either way.
That's one of the things that's been utilised or used in the conversation about Limerick, has been their strength and depth and how the bench has always helped them. But I suppose, Tommy, the Clare panel as well has caught up. Like, you saw Aaron Shanner come off the bench and score a couple of crucial points in that last win against Limerick as well. So teams like Clare are catching up, and certainly from the 50th, 55th minute on, that they have the players as well to change the game.
Yeah, and Shannon, he's a huge addition in the form he's in, because with, say, Sean Finn gone, you have Mike Casey in there now, and he's a smaller. Well, Finn wasn't too big either, but listen, he was just a genius of a cornerback. As was a Jackie said, you go into Sean Finn's dungeon when you go into that corner, and there's not too many lads come out of it. But Mike Casey in there, Shannon went there in the last couple of minutes the last day and scored a couple of great points. He has that huge size advantage. He has that huge height advantage. So when the game is in the melting pot in the last probably 10 minutes, they will probably show Shannon in. And Ian Galvin is a super player as well to score. He scores a lot of goals. So like they'll probably put him in at some stage if he's not starting. He probably will start, but he's inside and he's a danger man too. So yeah, absolutely. I think Clare have the panel now to go on and, you know, cause serious troubles for Limerick.
Serious troubles, but maybe not win from the sounds of what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think the Cleary one is what changes it for me. I just feel Limerick, since the league, like if you go back and remember their form in the league, like it was like Ray Keane and Turin versus Juventus. They were just in the flow, this magical flow. We've all had these games. They don't happen too many times in your career or over that long a period where no matter where you go, the ball just follows you, Ger. And you cannot explain it with things you've done in training or fitness. It's just games happen where the ball follows you. You could be down in your hunkers looking up waiting for a break. Next minute the ball comes in, you just catch it. Or it could hit off your shin. Another day it go into the back of the net. This time it pops up into your hand. In this league, I felt Limerick, because if you go through individually their players, there weren't too many of them playing 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, but the team as a group were just in the flow, where they were beating everybody really, really, you know, easily, probably in the end, playing around with the ball. And since then, their players have been, I felt, just searching for form, where they had to work for it and wasn't really happening. Like, you look at their great players of Keane Lynch, Garrod, Hegarty, like, just couldn't really get into the game. And but the last day against Cork, I just felt it turned the probably corner. That was a Cork team. Like, we've seen, they won 3 under-21 All-Irelands now about 4 years. Cork are on, even out of Munster. They're still, their people are happy with how, the direction the team and the squad is going. And they played very well last week, but Limerick also, they were able to beat him and start finding a bit of form. Hegarty start finding a bit of form. Keane Lynch, although he only came on, he won a few vital possessions in the last 4 or 5 minutes. And I think with them players come back into form, with the history that's on the line, with the derby type nature of the game, with what happened there a couple of weeks ago in the Gaelic grounds, I just think there'll be no mad Al Pacino type speeches needed in the dressing room. I'd say you could just let them boys into it and on they'll go. So I think it'll be tight, but I just think Conor Cleary, that injury is what shades it for me.
The physicality of this Limerick team as well, Tommy, like, there was some very interesting comments from John Kiley this week as well. He was saying the narrative around Limerick being a physical team is a load of nonsense. He was saying, how is that measured? What do? You're 80 pounds heavier a team. What is it like? I don't see any measurement that would stack up. He was kind of saying that there's this perception that maybe just because the Limerick team are taller than other teams, that's what it is. Do you think Limerick are more physical and more of a physical presence than other teams?
Yeah, no, well, say naturally, yes, but regards mentality, no, because they are absolutely, and they play on the edge or wherever the edge may be, I don't mind, but they go for every ball with very, little fear of if someone's in the way, that's just what happens, and I just think because they're champions, that's where the scrutiny is. Like I've said here and said before, the teams coming up against Limerick, they're probably even more physical, playing more on the edge, but nobody notices because no one picks out the instance where there's a late tackle or a late pull, because no one ever does for the underdogs. And Limerick are the favourites, they're the champions, they're the team everyone wants to take down. So all the scrutiny is on when an incident happens when they're involved. But when Tipperary took them on, they were unbelievable physical and they unbelievably played in the edge. When Clare took them on down the Gaelic grounds, it was incredible to watch the game, say, not looking at television cameras. So if the shoe had to be an underfoot, we'd be saying, you'd be taking into consideration the other teams. Are they playing on the edge? Are they over physical? So I would agree 100% with John Kiley. I see 99% of the time them Limerick players, they go for that ball as if their lives depend on it, with the ball only. And hurling is such a fast game. A sidestep here or a mistimed tackle here, it looks terrible. But there's so many cameras at games, Shane. It's as unbelievable. You pick up every mistake, and that's the way hurling is. like a shoulder to shoulder. People want the shoulder to shoulder. That, in my view, that can't happen anymore, because you miss time in 1 second, you're gone. It's a shoulder into the chest or the head or some way aside. And then players are going down now because, like, at one stage of forward, right, a back comes in and is being physical on him, Shane. He's never pulled on that, really. Pulling the jersey or dragging him down to the ground or giving him a little dig, not to hurt him, ratting like that, but just. And a forward one time could defend himself, give it back to the defender. But now if he does that, some camera will pick him up, or a linesman or an umpire will get a red card. So that's why you're now seeing forwards going down that bit more, because they've no other choice. And they're going down to draw attention from the referee to the incident. But no, I agree 100% with John Kiley. But they definitely have a huge size advantage. Like, sure, there's 4 or 5 of them 6'5", and there's probably 10 or 11 of them over 6'1".
Yeah, that helps.
Like, to give you one,
that helps.
That helps. Like, I didn't mark Wally Welsh too many times, Walter from Kilkenny, but say a couple of times I marked him in training. Like, the only way to get the ball off Walter was to get the ball before he does. I heard Paul Murphy even referencing it during the week with the great players, Joe Hannings, Teacher Reeds. But with Walter Welch, if you didn't get the ball first, like, you're in trouble, because Walter is 6'5", and he just either fling you out of the way or go around you, or he had many different ways. And Limerick have 4 or 5 of them, like Walter Welch, so they have a huge advantage with their natural size.
You look like you're in the Limerick panel yourself, Tommy, this morning with that jacket.
That's me. Go to Adidas jacket. Have it about 10 years at this time, retro.
The last thing about this, right? So the game finished a draw in normal time, and Limerick won it last year, and it seemed to take a fair bit out of Clare, because we didn't see them do justice to themselves. Obviously they beat Wexford the next day out, and then they didn't do justice to themselves against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final. It was a brilliant performance by Kilkenny, so it's hard to know what exactly happened, but it felt a little bit like Limerick broke their soul in the game last year. How do the losers of this game make sure that they're still contenders in the All-Ireland series and that they don't suffer the same fate? Is there any way of preparing for that or preventing it?
I don't think so. And even on the greater, wider scale, Ger, like, there's a lot of commentary around Leinster have it, the advantage going into the All-Ireland series, that they're fresh going into it. But let's go back to 2018-19 when the round robin started. Munster teams, or Munster finalists in most cases, have won the All-Ireland final. Whether that was Limerick, whether that was Tipperary in 19. So the Munster champions, Munster finalists, and I think once was in 2018 when Limerick they only came third place. But the Munster team has won the All-Ireland final every year since this round robin. So it doesn't stack up. But I hear what you're saying. Your most recent memory is last year, and that's how badly, I suppose, Clare performed after such a thrilling Munster final. But I've always said the hardest game that you've played is after you play out of your skin and lose, or even play out of your skin and draw. And they played, some of the best hurling that was ever played in Munster Championship, in the Munster final last year. Like, they scored a sideline to draw the game from inside the 21. Like, there was magical stuff going on in Thurles last. It was the last year, and it was in Thurles. It was at the game, but it was a magical day to be part of. So they had all these guys, Ger, clapping them on the back, telling them they're great lads, but they lost. And like, winning trophies is where you can talk about performing till the cows come home. It's all about winning trophies, and it is for that ultimate satisfaction. Because yes, I played well, but we lost. Right, you feel halfway good that you performed and you didn't leave your form in the dressing room. You played with great heart. But the true satisfaction comes when you go home as champions. And Clare, like this Clare team, they haven't felt that way probably in a long time. Now, I think the minor win last weekend will give the county a lot of hope and even take a bit of pressure off this team this weekend, because it means the future is bright. But this team won the All-Ireland in 2013. The one was it 4 under-21 All-Irelands. It was a 3 in a row, and it felt like they were going to go on and dominate the landscape. But they didn't even, get back to Croke Park for huge, you know, a large number of years, and they haven't won a Munster Championship. And for Clare, I feel the Munster Championship means so much because, you know, they've won so few of them. Like when they won the All-Ireland night, players, especially Shawnee McMahon is one I really remember. He felt the Munster Championship victory was what meant most, and probably was, you know, is the one he really dreamt of all his life. Probably never dreamt of winning All Ireland. So these Clare players, young players, they grow up dreaming of winning Munsters, and they haven't won one yet. So I think it is really important for them. For Clare especially, I think Limerick will recover no problem, but I think for Clare especially, I think it's a big one to win. Okay, let's talk a bit about Galway and Kilkenny before we wrap up here. Kilkenny's injury problems. Adrian Mullen, I think I read somewhere it'll be a miracle for him to make it back in time. His thumb injury, it looks like Mossy Keoghan and Mikey Butler might be gone as well. Are those injuries enough to swing the pendulum slightly back in Galway's favour? I think we might have lost you there, Tommy, did we? Yeah, we'll get that line back to Tommy. We'll just do another couple of minutes here. OTB AM, live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. So Limerick, slight favourites for the game against Clare. Galway and Kilkenny, they're very difficult to know where these two sides are. Had a draw. I'm just trying to remember. Was that? I was going to say it was Nolan Park, but it might not have been actually. Where Galway needed a big comeback to get into it, and Galway also needed a big comeback to get into the games against Dublin. But when they were coming back, they looked brilliant in both games. Yeah. When they were down, they were like some real Jekyll and Hyde stuff from Galway. In the hours against Dublin were remarkable from Galway. Like, yeah, 12 points down to come back is pretty impressive, but handing points to the Dubs the last day, certainly from watching that game. Inside forwards getting a lot of space, but it's hard to know what to read into those previous games, especially the Kilkenny game against Wexford. Bit of a shootout, bit of chaos as well. Certainly the injuries will play some sort of role. Adrian Mullen being out is a big one, big loss for Kilkenny, but that's a fascinating match, and it's the second game as well. So kind of the Munster final usually would be the second game, would it? It's a 1:45, and then 4 o'clock for the other one in Croker. So the appetite will at least be whetted across the afternoon. Clare, every bit as physical as Limerick, says James Coughlin, or Colin, depending on what part of the country you're in. Colin McCarthy says any close game recently has been Clare at 95% against Limerick at 75%. Both teams hit peak performance, Limerick win. But if both teams hit peak performance, you know, when have we seen Limerick in their peak performance recently? It's been a while. Finn is class, but Limerick have the players to replace him. Clare don't have anyone without destroying our half back line by taking Davy Mack out of wing back. And then a couple of people pointing out that Tommy subtly nailing his colours to the mast. Hashtag Limerick Aboo. Tommy wearing his Limerick colours, says David Valley, and Colin McCarthy in this morning. So even when you are perfect, it's tough to beat Limerick. Wasn't it Sarah Donovan was on with us after the Cork Limerick match, and she was saying like Cork hit 11 shots in the first 20 minutes of that match, scored 11 points. The scoring accuracy was ridiculous, and yet still lost the game by a point. So you can be near perfect against Limerick and still lose. Yeah, and like they're an all-time great team, so that is the crack. That's what you need to do. If you're going to see it through, like you are going to have to beat one of the all-time great teams. We have on the phone? Yeah, okay. Well, no, 2 more minutes. It is a like when you look at Clare not having won a Munster since '98, though, like there's more on the line for them. As Tommy said there, as long as you're in the Munster final, you have been in a contender for the All-Ireland in previous years. So Clare will just want to win one of those Munster titles. Like this Clare squad have to, at some point. Like winning the All-Ireland is great in 2013, but this Clare squad, I mean, it's been building blocks, and the job they've done in recent years, they've been probably the closest team traditionally and most consistently with Limerick as well. We've got Tommy back on the phone. Tommy, we were talking about the injuries that Kilkenny have suffered, maybe swinging the pendulum back to Galway. Is that fair?
Yeah, I fully agree with that, Ger. 100% on the money. Like, great hopes for this Kilkenny team. Like, I just felt they had the forwards. They were putting up huge, big scores. Even go back to the Wexford game when they lost the 3 lads, they still scored 5 goals. But they're now missing Adrian Mullen, who for me is probably the number 1 Kilkenny player for the last year or two. Like, watching him last year for club and county, he was 9 out of 10 in most games. He was just physically he's at his peak. Hurling, like there's so many of the Mullins brothers. He's a younger brother, he's only about 15. He's unbelievable as well, Jake Mullen, but it's just in their genes. And he's gone, like it looks like a season-ending injury with his hand. Then Mossy Keown and Mikey Butler, like Mossy was one of the farm county hurlers for Kilkenny for the last couple of weeks. He's been outstanding since the Leinster round robin began. Mikey Butler, like he marked Tony Kelly in last year's All-Ireland semi-final. He was brilliant in the All-Ireland final. Like he kept Sean Finn out of, Sean Finn in brilliant form was kept out of the cornerback in the All-Star team only because of the sheer excellence of Mikey. And even against Galway last year, I'm nearly sure he took up Cathal Mannion. So, like, if definitely Mullen is out, but if the two lads are out as well, it's just a serious dent. 3 out of 15, like a fifth of the team, and they're 3 of their best players in the form of their lives. So, I definitely think it swings in Galway's favour, but this Kilkenny team, like they're going for 4 in a row themselves. For Galway, like in all their dominance underage levels, like even since the great Kilkenny team that was all conquering, they finished around say 0-14. Most of them are gone. So they've only won 3 Leinster since 2009. We talk about All Ireland, but this team Galway, they've only won 3 Leinster, so they're not easy to win. The 1-0-12, 17 and 18, then with me all O'Donoghue. So it is time that they won another Leinster championship because they have the players. Who's in the form for them at the moment? Say Dahi Burke seems to be, really after growing into that centre back role, which has shown me that goal he scored against Dublin the last year. He just wandered up the field like he does, I suppose, with the footballers. But I seen him against Wexford around the year. He's doing that kind of the whole time, so he needs to be tracked. And up front, Concon and Nyland, they're the new guys. So it'll probably depend on the form of Conor Cooney and Conor Whelan. Joseph Cooney has been the one probably of the older brigade that has been really stepping up in the last couple of games. He's probably kept them in him the last day against Dublin. So I think it'll depend on the form of their players that are there probably 7 or 8 or 9 years. I think the young fellas will perform.
Have you seen a team be as inconsistent as Galway at some stage in the season, put it all together and go on a run? I suppose what I'm wondering here, is it possible that they can get that, whatever that kink is, out of their system?
Yeah, well, a match is played over 70 minutes, so I presume the inconsistency you speak of is during games. Against Kilkenny, I suppose, in all the part they went down by so much, but still came back. So I would say, from a Galway point of view, this Galway team is probably doing what other Galway teams haven't been able to do, and that is stay in the game, every game, until probably the last couple of minutes. Like one time when you're playing Galway, one day you go out and they could beat you by 5 or 10 points. Another day, if you were beating them by 5 points, you'd end up beating them by 10 points. Towards this Galway team, and I had a communion or christening for the last round of games that Sunday. So I was watching the games on television, but that when Dublin went, I'd say, was 10 points ahead. I just said to a couple of lads in the sitting room, I said, watch this, since Henry took over this Galway team, they don't give up. They're always still there. And that's not just an attitude on the day. That's through sheer hard work for the previous 6 or 8 months that gives you the confidence to perform and the fitness levels to perform for 70 full minutes. And with that, they went 12 points up Dublin early in the second half. And I said to the lads, I guarantee there'll be only a puck of the ball in at the end. And lo and behold, we've seen what happened. They came back and threw the game, probably should have won it. So I think it is in this Galway team to stay in games. And that's what gives them a chance. Jerry, yes, inconsistent during the game, but over the course of 70 minutes, they have been probably very consistent, and even if you go back to last year's All-Ireland semi-final, there was times in that Limerick game where it looked like they were going to shoot on and be 10 points. But no, they pulled them back, and there was only a puck of the ball in it at the end. So Galway slight favourites for you then? Yeah, just with the injuries, absolutely. I put Galway a slight favourites. All right, Tommy, good stuff. Enjoy the games this weekend. Thanks, lads.
That's Tommy Walsh giving us some thoughts on the Leinster and Munster Hurling Championships. It is 8:33. You're watching OTB AM. We're live every morning with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Now, we're turning our attention to the other big merger in world sport after LIV and the PGA Tour, and that's the putative merger between the GAA, the LGFA and the Camogie Association. And I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Katie Liston and Conor Meyler to the show. Katie Liston is a senior lecturer at Ulster University, and of course Conor Meyler, apart from being a decent footballer, is also a PhD researcher in sport, leadership and gender. You're both very welcome to the show. Katie, I might start with you. You guys decided to do this as a piece of work while the merger was happening. So can you talk to us a little bit about how the idea came to pass and what was involved in it?
Sure, Ger. Good morning. Thanks for having us. I suppose the first thing to say is we're careful not to use the word merger. And you'll see why in a few minutes. But the reason why we started this work is because we realised, having looked at the research, that we know very little about what would be, I suppose, a good model and a useful pathway for a multi-entity, multi-sport merger, the term that you used. Now, we know that in unanimous passing of the motion, the word integration was used. So I think that's a more open, inclusive approach, and it potentially offers a number of options going down the line, one of which our recommendation might be that we would consider actually building a new organisation for Gaelic Games rather than a merger as such, Ger. So essentially this came out of the recognition that we don't have a theoretically informed and an evidence-based pathway, and we hope that in putting this into the public domain in a very constructive spirit, that it will be available to all those in the Gaelic Games family to be able to grapple with the issues at stake.
Okay, so this isn't a piece of work that has been commissioned by the GAA. It's not officially a piece of work by any of the three organisations. It's off your own creativity and off your own bat, really.
It is, and I'll maybe hand you over to Conor, because Conor's now undertaking doctoral research, as you've identified, and his research will actually look at the theme of gender equality in sport.
Conor, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. Thanks for having us. So, as Katie alluded to, this is part of my PhD project, which through TUS and support of Aoife, Dr. Aoife Lane as my supervisor, and with Katie here from Ulster University. So, it's part of a wider project, and as Katie alluded to, it was probably too good of an opportunity to turn down when we seen that there was no research on it, and then the wider sphere of gender equality in sport and leadership, which is what I was initially studying. This made sense to delve into.
Well, it's in the live environment, a massive thing is happening in Irish sporting history that kind of grapples with all of the questions that you are studying at the moment. So good timing.
It is good timing, without a doubt, and I think that we have an opportunity here to do something historical. We have three associations which have such strong traditions in Irish sport and society that we have an opportunity now to sort of, come forward and say, look, how we treat women in sport, and particularly in Gaelic Games and the representation, the female representation, what we could do here now with Gaelic Games family is something that, not just for 10 years time, 50 years time, 100 years time, the impact it could have, for the future of the sport is huge. And also how we acknowledge females in Irish society, the impact it could have there, and the ripple effect post-merger, post-integration is huge.
You obviously felt, Conor, that there were issues that needed to be addressed, that needed to be diagnosed before they can be fixed. Is that what drew you to this field of study in the first place?
Well, look, I'll be totally honest, Ger, I probably didn't see myself initially going into this research, and once I was probably made a wee bit more aware of some of the issues that were going on and the disparity between the men's association and the two female associations, I probably felt somebody had to speak up and say something and do something about it. And I'm probably coming at it from a different angle as a male inter-county player. I have been very fortunate throughout my career that I haven't had a lot of the issues that some of the females have faced in the through the Camogie and the ladies football with access and facilities and funding and everything else that comes with it. I haven't faced that, and to be honest, I probably will never fully understand some of the the issues that some of these ladies have faced, and that's now probably given me a sense of purpose to actually go and do something worthwhile and say, yeah, I can do something about this here. And as a male, I do think that we have to be able to stand up and speak out about it. You're coming at it from a different angle as such, and you're that sort of advocate in favour, in support as well.
Yeah.
I guess, Katie, a merger or integration of this size and scale in this country is unprecedented, but you did use a case study of the formation of Golf Ireland, which, interestingly as well, came from two single-sex organisations, so that was obviously utilised to your advantage as well, to see how it can work.
It was. So what we did is the first stage, and we spent about 4 or 5 months on this, so it's really great to be able to get it into the public domain now. We first of all scanned all of the available research on mergers and integration, both in corporate, business and public sectors. And in the public sector, that's where most of national governing bodies sit. They're actually quasi-public sector bodies when you look at their structure and status. We also then recognise that there are distinctive elements in the Irish context, and particularly the history heritage of the three associations, the extent to which they're deeply, deeply embedded in the Irish psyche and in Irish culture. So for that reason, we also felt it was an opportune moment to try to understand what had happened in Golf Ireland, which is a very recent case. It is a single-sex integration process, but probably the exception to the norm in Golf Ireland compared to what we've seen internationally. At the end of that process, it was very clear to all involved that if they were serious about equality, they would establish a new entity, which is what they did. So essentially, at the end of a process that has a number of stages to it, which we outline in the project, what it might look like, the Golfing Union of Ireland, the men's GUI, was formally dissolved. The ILGU was formally dissolved to be able to create the new Golf Ireland that has a number of underpinning principles firmly embedded to equality.
It's interesting as well, like you look at the GA Congress in February we mentioned, and like an overwhelming passing of the motion to prioritise this merging or integration, but there were 10% of delegates that voted against that motion, Katie. So is the hope that a policy report like this can maybe convince some of those 10% at least that this is a good idea?
Well, not just those 10%, and indeed I was very drawn to that 10%, I must say, and it would be great to speak to those if they're able to do that, and we'll be looking at opportunities through Conor's research to be able to have an open door to as many people as possible who want to speak to us about their views, but not just that 10%. We found that in the almost unanimous votes at the three congresses that everybody voted for integration, but nobody had a clear conception of what it would look like. So there's a range of views on what equality means. And for that reason, there are maybe those who wouldn't agree with equality per se. There are others at the other end of the continuum who are arguably very clear in favour of equality. But yet we have to put in place what we think are a set of agreed principles and values that can now, hopefully on a consensual basis, guide the negotiations and the outcome of what it would look like. So, I mean, there was probably two main observations that we drew out when we looked at Golf Ireland and when we looked at the case studies around the world. And interestingly, there was an interesting case study in Golf New Zealand, Cricket Australia, UK Sport, and English and Welsh cricket. By and large, all of the mergers, and the term merger was used, Ger, in other scenarios, most of the mergers between men's and women's NGBs have occurred in the last 30 years or so in a neoliberal context. So some of that's been driven by financial imperatives, rationalisation, minimal duplication of services. We see it in the public sector as well and in the private sector. So typically then, in that kind of a scenario, women have tended to be the weaker party when you've had the conjoining of NGBs. For instance, in Australian women's cricket, it was even described by some of the researchers there as almost being cap in hand because they lacked assets, revenue, power and influence. So that was the first observation. And the second one was that in that context, integration, which is the term that's in the motion of the three associations here, In other contexts, that process led to the absorption of the women's NGB, typically by their men's counterpart, sometimes forced from the top down into the pre-existing organisational template, if you will, of the larger, typically men's organisation. So in that regard, when that happened, there were also missed opportunities for structural reform, genuine structural reform, aside from the creation of what was usually another operational axis for women's, add women and stir to the existing template. Now, in Gaelic games, we know that structural reform will be needed to deliver equality. And there are also opportunities to address concerns around over-governance, especially at county board level, which has been described by some to us as almost governance heavy. And something similar had happened in Golf Ireland. So in our interviews, Conor and I were involved with stakeholders who've led that process in Golf Ireland. And they said something similar to us. For instance, the old GUI was even described as 4 tails wagging one dog because of the power of the provincial boards, if you were. So the risk, I think, is that in the absence of very real structural reform, guided by equality and underpinned by transformative leadership, the long-held values could exert an undue influence over integration.
Okay.
And those who worked very hard to progress women's Gaelic games could be on the periphery in anything that might resemble absorption or consolidation. So for that reason, our 5th recommendation is that we consider the establishment of a new Gaelic Games organisation underpinned by principles and values, the leading one being equality.
Okay, and on the face of it, that might be too radical for some people, but it might not be. It might be, we have entered a kind of weird period where some stuff is getting done much more quickly now, particularly post-COVID, where the organisation realises it needs to change. And there's also pressure from government to hit quotas in terms of board members, which obviously you could do pretty easily if you integrated properly or if you set up a new organisation. So there's a little window where there is power and influence on the basis that government funding won't be forthcoming if the GAA doesn't change. And we have had relatively strong sports minister pronouncements on that just recently. Conor, is it your sense that work similar to what you're doing at the moment is ongoing within the GAA? Mary McAleese obviously presented to annual Congress, the last Congress, this year's one at 2023. Do you think that there's whatever work is being done is actually thinking in the same or similar terms to what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so for anyone who isn't aware, we do have a steering committee at the minute consisting of 3 presidents, the 3 CEOs, and Mary McAleese is chair of that group. And I suppose I have approached the steering committee, offering our services and advice, as Katie alluded to. We are coming from an evidence-informed, theoretically underpinned point of view, and we feel that the research can be of benefit to the committee, and we're very happy to support the committee in any capacity we can. I've had some really productive conversations with the likes of Hilda Breslin in the Camogie Association and Larry McCarthy in the GAA, and we're really keen to get this research, get the research paper and the policy brief across to former President Mary McAleese and be of service. And as Katie has alluded to before as well, it's so complex, this merger or integration, compared to some of the research we've looked at before, because you have 3 associations across 2 jurisdictions on one island. You have that strong history and tradition, and the fact that it will be an integration of unequals in a lot of senses when you look at the representation and the annual revenues. But what we're looking at is, potentially if you were to rip the script up for Gaelic Games and start a new association or organisation today in 2023, what would that look like? And how would that be? Instead of 3 associations formed in the early 1800s and 1884 and 1904 and 1974. You know, if we were to start a new association today, what would that look like, and what would be best looking forward for males and females together, for young boys, young girls growing up in our game? How would that association look?
That sounds like a really good idea. Katie, before we wrap this up, what do you think is a realistic time frame for this? Because it's obviously been spoken about now for a long period of time. If we're to do this properly, what's realistic?
Well, that's a great question, Ger. I mean, the policy brief is available from today, open access. Everybody go and look at it. I would say go and look at page 8, because everybody will be interested in the timeline where we've captured how many times the idea has been visited in the Gaelic Games context. And it's been dating back to the 1970s is the short answer to that. Now, I agree with you, Ger, that in some ways there are parallel structures and similar operationals within the three associations. So a lot of progress could be made in some areas, whereas there will be a little bit more work to be done in others. But based on what we've seen both in Golf Ireland, which is a national, local example, as well as internationally, we think that to do this well and to plan for a full integration process, it could take up to 5 years or more. And that would be to do it well. And what would that mean? Well, essentially, it would mean that the systems of work and the organisational structures of a new entity would support male and female members equally across all units. So we're thinking players, administrators, coaches, officials. A funding model would prioritise investment for a time-bound period in the Gaelic Games played by girls and women. Clubs and counties would have dedicated financial support to realise integration. And that might be through new funding streams or additional funding streams. And there will be a quota approach, a target approach in place to ensure that women are fully integrated into the decision-making governance structures of Gaelic Games. Now, all of that could be monitored and evaluated. And we think that within 5 years' time, the blueprint would be there, where a strategic plan could then deliver on equality, probably a very realistic target then in a decade, where we would genuinely have an organisation that is both equal in terms of its principles, but in practice, delivering that on the ground.
Okay. It sounds like it's a great. It's a great piece of work. It all sounds, in theory, like it's very realisable, and then obviously it meets the real world of GA politics, and that's when all the excitement starts, and we get to see what comes next. But we wish you both the very best of luck with it. And so, Conor, it's obviously ongoing from your perspective. Again, I understand that the worst thing you can ask any PhD student is when are you going to finish it? But when are you going to finish it, Conor?
No, we're not too keen on time frames here, and even just to follow on, just to finish off on Katie's point, it's hard to put a time frame on something like this. From a structural point of view, we could have an integration or a merger, but the problem is, if we want one that's underpinned by equality, which is, you know, what we've the language that's been used by the steering committee, it could take longer than 5 years for us to have genuine equality, because we're trying to change attitudes, behaviours and perceptions of people, which isn't necessarily something we can put a time frame on. So just to finish off on that, my PhD, since going full time in February, I'll have another couple of years of that, and we'll have another couple of studies which will be focused around this area as well, probably looking at a more wider sense of how some of the gender inequalities in sport and leadership worldwide. And then we also want to conduct a national survey at some point to try and get a better understanding of what's happening on the ground within Gaelic Games, some of the fears, concerns, perceptions that people have about an integration and what that actually might look like. So don't know if it's going to be a straight line, but we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, and sorry, Katie, one last thing. It's really important that there's male allyship here, that this isn't just the female organisations shouting for equality, that there are strong male voices within the GAA who come forward and say, this is the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, one of our recommendations is that we have transformative leadership throughout this process. I think Conor and Aoife and I are doing a decent job, and I'm sorry Aoife couldn't be with us this morning. She's actually travelling at the moment. But I mean, we're covering the three provinces. We are deeply embedded in the history and heritage of Gaelic Games ourselves, but much more than that, we're trying to bring our expertise to bear in a very practical and constructive way. And you're right, if there is transformative leadership, I think with the right people involved in this process, there can be a very, very positive outcome.
All right, Dr. Katie Liston and Conor Meyler, we'll leave it there for now. Best of luck with it. It is a great piece of work. We'll tweet out links to it as well, but everybody should go and dig into it. Very, very accessible. So my thanks to Katie Liston and Conor Meyler for explaining all that to us this morning. It's 8:53. Some more quick headlines for you on the back pages. Golf sells out. LIV pumps in billions as rival tours merge. The Golf Civil War was declared over yesterday after an extraordinary peace deal was struck between the traditional tours and the Saudi-backed LIV circuit. We're going to talk with Riath Al-Samarrai, who has written that story, or is one of the co-authors of that story, in a few minutes' time. And then a picture again of Teddy McCarthy in action, 1965 to 2023. That's the back there. The back page of The Guardian. Saudis take control. 3 golf tours merge and shock end to stalemate. Picture of Big Phil.
He's loving it, isn't he?
It's he's
what a day for him.
Dressed in black. London Irish kicked out of the Premiership after the deal fails. Saudi rebels buy into golf world order, and it's Big Phil with the thumbs up. I don't know if that's if that was like, he's just always available with a thumbs up these days. And then life bans for the snooker repairs, that one. And then, did we do Greenpeace already? Shock of Saudis swoop to end golf's civil war. It's green because the greens are green, but it's also green because of all the money, Shane.
Oh, I see.
That's it.
I see what they did there.
Works as a proper double entendre.
Dollar bills. Just to say on that GA merger integration as well, like, Riath Burns is someone who'll be sitting watching this, you'd imagine, and reading this policy very closely. And if you think back to like Sean McCaig and how his presidency is remembered for something like Rule 21, like Riath Burns takes over next year for a 3-year term, and this could be huge. Like, it's one of the biggest moves that there has ever been in Gaelic games and in the Camogie and in the ladies football. So I'd love to see it happen relatively quickly, but obviously in the right way as well.
Yeah, the GAA is a complex organisation. You think they've got the joint venture with RTE. Are they going to give up a share of that and control of that to this new organisation? Might be an opportunity for them to revisit that. As I keep pointing out, they don't need RTE for GAA Go, and it's really weird that conflict of interest is still at the heart of the organisation, deciding which games are behind a paywall and which games aren't.
Well, it turns out finances are the centre of the controversy in terms of mergers or integrations. Now, certainly shared use of pitches and gyms have been another issue in the GAA as well. And
I'd love to hear from people, and maybe that was Conor was talking about doing a survey what people's fears are. Does everybody get equal access to pitches at the moment? And some clubs are already merged is the other part of this, so it's actually going to be not that big a deal, but maybe just a more formal, I'm sorry, but everybody needs equality here. And that might be a bit for some of the dinosaurs.
If you ever feel like you're not doing enough with your life, just look at Conor Meyler winning All Ireland's, playing county football and doing a PhD.
And Dr. Katie Liston did exactly the same thing.
It's ridiculous.
Has more medals than Conor.
How do they have time?
Right, so as I said there, the back page story on all the papers today: golf sells out, LIV pumps in billions as rival tours merge. I'm delighted to say Riath Al-Samarrai is with us this morning. Riath, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, chaps. Yeah, very well, thanks. A slightly fraught evening for what you're just mentioning there, but all is well.
What type of details are we getting at the moment about how the deal was done, and actually what the future holds?
Okay, so dealing with the kind of first part of that, so we spoke to Jay Monaghan last night. He's the commissioner of the PGA Tour and the sort of fairly central figure in all of this, which I'm sure we can discuss a little bit later. He might have just taken the mantle from Greg Norman as the sort of most mocked man in golf on account of what's happened in the last 24 hours. Now, in essence, he says it's been a 7-week process. We know that sort of peace brokers have been drafted into this. One of them was Amanda Staveley, who's been brought in on the PIF side. Of course, she's the Newcastle United director, so she's very well embedded in the sort of Saudi system of doing things. Now, there have been these sort of back channel conversations going on, parallel, of course, to furious litigation that's been flying back and forth between the PGA Tour and LIV, and also involving sort of the DP World Tour, so what was once the European Tour. They've also been involved in arbitration with LIV players. So we've had this frenzied landscape, fear and loathing in golf. Sport's never known anything like it. Now, they sort of brought in these peace brokers about seven weeks ago, and talks have started. They've really escalated in the last month, all of which has culminated in this bombshell announcement yesterday afternoon that the PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and LIV are now merging. Now, obviously, what people will have seen and heard in the last 24 hours is they're going to remain three separate entities as far as kind of competition goes, but they are all under one commercial umbrella. And I suppose the real upshot of it is that will be largely under the control of LIV. They're the ones who can be putting the money in, the Saudis rather. And I would say the sensible interpretation from all of this is that Saudi Arabia have just bought out golf. It's been a pretty dramatic day or so.
Sorry, the line kind of broke up there, but essentially the tours will be under the control of Saudi Arabia.
In a sense, yes. So they're going to be under this centralised commercial hub. The chairman of that is going to be Riath Al-Samarrai, who's the governor of the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, and indeed sort of Newcastle United, I suppose. So yeah, there are some who would argue that this has been the plan all along. The entire purpose of creating LIV it's been described to me in a sense as a Trojan horse. It was their way. It was Saudi's way of getting themselves into the landscape and being able to spread their wings once they got inside. So I suppose the other way it's been put to me is they came in through the back door, and now they've got the keys to the front door as well. They had this marginalised product. Now, in this commercial tie-in with the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, they're right there front and centre in golf.
Riath, the position of Jim Monaghan as that PGA Tour commissioner now, is that being heavily called into question? Like, hypocrisy is a word that's been thrown around in the last 12 hours or so or more. Yeah,
absolutely. I think so. There was so currently this week will be the Canadian Open. Rory McIlroy is there defending his title. So there was a players' meeting last night. Monaghan told us that was heated and intense. A couple of players who we've spoken to have told us it was a few notches on from that again. We don't yet fully know McIlroy's position in all of this. He's going to be speaking today, so that's going to be interesting, given he turned down an offer in the region of £400 million to go to LIV, and might well now be asking himself, well, okay, I made that decision. I spent the better part of a year furiously defending PGA Tour, only for them to subsequently get in bed with the Saudi Arabians. What's going on here, guys? So we can understand that position, all of which puts Jay Monaghan in a very awkward position. He's brokered this deal. He certainly signed off on it. He's the commissioner of the PGA Tour. And this is a man who has been very outspoken about LIV. He also took the step of bringing up the situation around 9/11. What does this mean if given Saudi involvement in 9/11? How can golfers in good conscience, etc., go and sign up with the Saudi Arabian Golf Tour? Now these are incredibly powerful comments to make, and of course he's now gone and signed up with the Saudi Arabians, and so he's left himself open to this accusation of hypocrisy. So you've got that aspect, on top of which you now have this question around his position. How can the players trust him? They were all kept in the dark on this. Almost, we saw people like Colin Morikawa, a two-time major winner, coming out on Twitter yesterday and saying he's finding out this news on social media, which is a remarkable situation. And on top of that, of course, he then told us last night that Rory himself, and of course the biggest name in the whole of the sport, Tiger Woods, only found out that this agreement was reached yesterday. So there are going to be some awkward questions for Jay Monahan in the background on all of this, and certainly all of the early feedback we're hearing is that the players are extremely unhappy about it.
It'll be very interesting to see what they can do. In the intermediate term, do all the events just go back to being 4 days, and golf goes back to being golf, and LIV as a format disappears? Or do you expect in next year and the year after for there to be like a LIV swing where it's the 3 days, no cuts for the top players? Like, do we have any idea what this actually means on a practical level?
So at the moment, the short answer to that is no. It's all to be confirmed. There was very much a feeling yesterday when they put the statement out that they were announcing peace in our time, but with very, very little meat on the bones. There was very little sort of indication of what this is going to look like going forward. Subsequently discovered the tours it won't be one great big global tour. The unification, as it were, comes under this sort of, the pooling of commercial resources. So that's the kind of point in it. What happens next with LIV is going to be fascinating. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about the sort of theory that they were created as a Trojan horse, that lends itself to the idea that it won't exist in its current format for long. Sort of Jay Monahan also indicated in that direction to us yesterday that it won't, what the future looks like isn't going to be what the present is, if you follow me. They want to keep the team aspect. I quite how that manifests itself and at what time in the year that falls, I'm not sure, but we could see a scenario where you have the PGA Tour, DP Tour, World Tour running as usual, and then you have sort of separate events whereby they run these team tournaments. They were very keen on the franchise model. There are people within the organisation who fully believe that team golf has a future on the regular calendar outside of the Ryder Cup. Having been to a couple of those events, I'm personally not convinced by that, but it's like a lot of things with this. It remains to be seen. Certainly what we're going to see is these players moving a lot more freely between tours from the end of this year. So, someone on LIV will be eligible to come back over to the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour. Players who resign their membership, they can reapply for membership. I think they'll still have to serve their suspensions that they were given in April and the quite severe fines they were given. They'd have to clear all of that before they could come back in. But the door will be open for them when that time comes.
Riath, this ends any what had been ongoing litigation between the two tours as well. Are we led to believe that that's a happy coincidence about this whole deal, or was that a significant part of the discussions?
Look, there were certainly people I spoke to yesterday who said, look, if this was an end game possibility all along, the litigation could be seen as a useful bargaining tool. I don't know if that was written into it from the beginning. This is sort of 4D chess kind of levels of Machiavellian intrigue at the moment, but it's looking at it, yes, in essence it does end immediately. They've said that in the statements. The litigation all goes away, and we are talking about a number of cases. We're talking, the sort of the antitrust cases, all of this very, very complicated business. But the PGAs were trying to sort of compel testimony from sort of key figures within the PIF, which had the potential to shine a huge light on this thing. It was all of that factors into the agreement that we saw yesterday.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Riath Al-Samarrai, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
It's 7 minutes past 9. It is time for the cash machine.
Off the balls cash machine.
So, May was a huge month for Cash Machine. 15 lucky winners and some winning life-changing amounts of cash. Mick in Wexford won 75 grand. Frank in Dublin won 50 grand. Liz, also in Wexford, won an incredible 81,000 euro. The winning showing no signs of slowing down this week. Somebody can win a cool 60 grand heading into summer. It's easy to take part. We're going to give you an amount. You take note of it, enter, and if we call you and you give us the number, you win the cash. This week on Cash Machine, we're giving away, it's a very easy number to remember, 60,000 euro exactly. To enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. If it's you, we call after 3 o'clock on Friday the 9th of June. Answer your phone within 5 rings, tell us your prize amount, and you win the money. To enter, text OTB to 57557. The cost is $2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You got to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Full terms are on our website at offtheball.com. You need to get your entry in by 3 o'clock on Friday the 9th of June, when we could be calling you. Answer within 5 rings, tell us the prize amount, and the cash is yours. It's 60,000 euro exactly. Text OTB to 57557. Back after these with Vinny Perth.
Off the balls cash machine.
3, 2, 1, go. Whether you're a Drive to Survive fan or Grand Prix expert, now you can stay up to date with the world of F1. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza, the ultimate podcast for F1 fans. The F1 Pod will keep you on the edge of your seat. For the best insight and analysis, subscribe to the Off the Ball daily podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza. Formula One? Yeah, we go to town on it.
I saw that say, I presume that's the article that was talking about the Alexia at halftime made like a big speech in the dressing room and basically told everyone to, you know, get their stuff together and
themselves on.
Biggie, what, like, I suppose when you're in the dressing room and you're having that sort of conversation, like what's she telling those Barcelona players, or what's the atmosphere like?
I mean, it's just amazing because Barca is special, and that group of players are very special because they've been playing together for a long time, and they know they are ready, they know they are the best, but then you have to play the game. And in the halftime, they were losing 2-0, and they were thinking, this is going to be like Olympic, are we going to be able to do it or no? And you just need someone like Alexia because she's a massive impact for all the girls. And I think she just said, if there is just one team in the world that can change this result, is us. So just let's go out and do it. And I actually think the first half they were waiting a little bit when they are amazing players. I don't know why they were waiting for Wolfsburg. I don't know what were they expecting from them, but they just needed to go for the game. And even though they had so many chances, but it just Barca hasn't been very effective lately.
Mm. No, they haven't played. I don't think they've played their best all season, just watching them. But what I was disappointed was the pressing in the first half. They're usually so good at that. They're so efficient at the pressing, and actually Wolfsburg were pressing better than them. So I think that really helped as well. That changed in the second half, and that was a massive...
Yeah, it was surprising because, you know, Wolfsburg do have some defensive frailties. We would have seen that against Arsenal, so you would have thought get in their faces and put them on the back foot, but it wasn't the case. I suppose it was just a really nervy start. Like, you don't expect Lucy Brahms to make a mistake like that early on either. But it came from a really good press from Wolfsburg.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
You heard a clip there from the latest episode of Koi Gig with Kathleen, Emma and Karen chatting to former Barcelona captain and Champions League winner Vicky Losada about her former teammate and countrymate Alexia Putellas. The Koi Gig pod on OTB is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. And make sure you check out the rest of the stuff on our podcast network, Dadcast, Football Daily, and Colin Boyle and Darren O'Sullivan. We'll play a clip from that in a few minutes' time. But Vinny is with us. Good morning, Vinny. How are you?
Morning. All good.
We were just chatting there where this is the last round of fixtures before the mid-season break.
Yeah, mid-season break kicks in now. So Dublin Airport, if you want to meet a League of Ireland player, get a jersey signed, head to Dublin Airport Saturday morning and you'll spot them.
One of them's flying into the villa in Love Island as well. You haven't heard any rumours?
No, that seems to be, I don't know, I heard that I heard that rumour as well somewhere yesterday. So
what would you say if one of your players came round to you and said, here, I'm away off here to the villa, Love Island Villa, for a few weeks?
Can only presume that's how you narrow it down. It has to be a part-time club. I can't see how. It just doesn't make any sense.
Unless they've decided it's good for the brand and they're going to sell a load of jerseys.
Yeah, that sounds something like American owner might come up with, but we don't have American owner anymore.
Jersey and sell $1 million.
Yeah, it does sound great, but no. Any advertisement is good, but in terms of if he's a serious footballer, I'd be surprised. But we'll see.
Okay, we will see. There's a couple of things I suppose we should talk about here. Rovers have opened up a gap and they get UCD in their last game. UCD bottom of the table before the mid-season break, so it looks like they're going to they'll definitely take some gap into the mid-season break because they're 4 points clear and there's only one game left. But it's going to be a long week and 10 days for people to stew over the fact that they've got to...
I think what's interesting about me coming on here is the feedback you get. It's great. And
are you being ironic there?
Yeah, no, I mean in a good way. At least we're talking, and I don't get everything right, but I probably questioned last week Shamrock Rovers being clinical enough in games, and I stand over the argument in the sense of, and some of the counter arguments, they score more goals than anyone else, so that's nonsense. But they have the best squad, they've the most possession in games, and when I made that comment, they played halfway through the season, they played 18 games and only won 9. So by and large, that shouldn't be good enough to win your league, but it most likely will. But what they were the weekend was clinical. I was at the Dundalk game and I watched their game against Sligo, and they were, particularly against Dundalk, they weren't exceptional by any stretch of imagination, but they were very clinical in how they took their goals and put Dundalk to bed. And against Sligo on a Monday night, to go up there and win 3-0, exceptional result, and everything sort of fell into their way over the weekend, and they've had a great weekend. And I've said here that I still fancy them by 10 points, and if you're making a handicap, you'd say Rovers -10, and you may have sort of weakened that a little bit to maybe -7, but still say 10 points, and I think they're that far ahead of everybody. And while I hope we get a title race, it seems inevitable that this is a big shift in the momentum, and can't stress enough going into the window. When you go into that window with a lead, it's great because it gives you a chance to recess where you're at and build from there.
Momentum is the thing. I know Ger love this argument, but is the break coming at a bad time for Rovers? Is like, would they prefer to just keep rolling along this the tracks the way they're going at the moment?
No, I think the break is good. It's good for you to. What's key about the break is I remember once. So you basically get 1 weekend off, but what was crucial, I remember once at Dundalk where we allowed our players off till a Wednesday of next week. We went on a training camp Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we flew home late Sunday night from a training camp in Spain. So and I met a League of Ireland manager on the same flight coming out of Spain / Portugal, and about 3 months later he says she can't compete with Dundalk, they have all the resources at the time. But even if we hadn't had the money to go to Spain, we'd have been back on the Wednesday training hard, Thursday, Friday. So it's an opportunity to reassess. It shouldn't be used as a holiday. So
mini pre-season.
Well, no, not necessarily. Like them days are gone now, because no matter what sport you talk about on here, you'll hear players' fitness levels. You don't put on a stone in the off season anymore, half a stone. Them days are gone. So it's about maintaining people's fitness, and it's why I struggle when I hear the lads talking about, say, gee, yeah, you can't peak every week. I'm like, all right, yeah, don't show your hand every week. You hear Loud didn't, or Derry didn't show their hand in the final. Like, all right, against Dublin, why not? Like, you know, imagine Man City, we can't play well every week, we have to wait for a Champions League final. But I can't can't fathom that, but there you go. But most modern day athletes now don't need a mini pre-season, and it's an opportunity to get into some tactical stuff for managers, particularly the ones that are heading into European football. They have to spend a little bit longer on the training ground and work on things.
Did the trip away help that team significantly, do you think?
Oh yeah, they were huge. I mean, particularly the injury prevention side of things and recoveries and people coming back from injuries. And so you remember they're an expensive way of doing things, but you'd have your physio with you for 24/7, so you might have a morning session with physiotherapist and an evening session. If you were near, I know where we went, we were near the sea, so the physio would take the lads down as a third session and do a sea session, and so all of them things. And it's just the professionalism, and no matter what players would tell you, they love it. They love everything done for them, all their meals covered in terms of times, different things, and players will love it. And no matter what you say, it gives your sort of ego, might be the wrong word, but gives you a boost as an athlete to be able to go and act the best and be the best.
Yeah, it's your it finally justifies all those hours that you did. You feel like you're
getting a bit of reward. And you've got to remember, it's like I made this argument to someone who was providing us with GPS stats. When I first took over Dundalk, I went to meet them and said, I'm competing in Champions League against Celtic, so I can't fall down on little things. I need you to help me here. So Shamrock Rovers players are competing in Champions League football, so I don't know whether they do a mini tour this year, but any little extra you can give players or any little advantage you can take, you have to take it. That's the level you're competing at.
There's a few things we need to talk about. Cork's upswing in form since they've changed manager, Pat's upswing in form, but Derry's form over the last 3 games, beaten at Sligo 1-0, drew 0-0 with Shells at home, and then hammered by Pats 4-1. That is not title race form.
No, and I was on Virgin on Monday night when we done the Derry and Pats game, and it was my first, I think one of my first times live, and I was conscious of saying a sentence I've used here in case I made a mistake with it, but teams are consistently inconsistent in their league, right? And it's a bit of a mouthful when you're live on TV, in case you get it wrong, the world we live in. But Derry, that sums up Derry. It sums up so many of the teams that you can go and look like title contenders, and it's sort of gone badly for them. The result against Pats is one thing. You can handle losing. You'll always have a bad, even winning the league. Rovers will have a bad night somewhere along the lines. You go back to years ago. Remember, you'd remember this. Newcastle beat United 5-0. Still went on to win the league. Yeah. There's always them. And as a manager, I've heard Pep speak about it, and staying calm, that's how you win leagues, right? But with the result is one thing, but actually the performance from Derry the other night was so poor, and the loss again of McElhenney and Duffy out of the team, and they look short of title contenders, I have to say, and the last week has been really inconsistent for them, and you just can't win a league that way. And it was a really poor night for them. Pats have lost 7 games this season and are now level on points with Derry, so that tells its own story for me.
Do Derry just need to go through this for a while, and let their manager experience what this is like, what that pressure was like, and how that whole, because if there was a period where Rovers fans wanted rid of the current Rovers manager who was about to take his team to 4 in a row. Like, football is really fickle, but the teams who stick it out, who work with their manager and their coaching team to develop them and go, okay, you're not at the level you need to be at the moment, and we need to be honest about that. You need to do better, but we're going to back you over the next while. Is that what they need to do?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One is, first of all, Rory Higgins knows how to win league titles. He's been involved in staff. He's himself won a league title. He's also been part of Stephen Kenny's staff and won a league title as a player, so he knows how it's done. What Derry have to do, what they have to do to catch Rovers, and they seem to have the finance and time, is it's going to take time. Rovers have stolen the march, and he is 300% the right man for that job, I feel, and that's not personal to Rory. Obviously we had great time together. when you know Higgins and his love for football and love for Derry, and he's from the area, all of them things, he has rebuilt the squad now that are disappointed only to be second, where for so long they were mid-table team. It will take them time. You're right to use the Stephen Bradley reference. There's plenty of them throughout the years, so it's just got to build a squad capable. Like they finished the game the other day with 3 young boys in midfield who will all be good players in their own right, and when the time comes, like someone like Jordan McAniff scored 6 goals for them, but he's not ready to go and be part of a midfield that can win a league unless they're firing with everybody, and they're just not there yet. So their time will come. They're well on the road. To be fair to Rory, I don't think he's overhyped winning the league. It's been people from the outside, because we're looking for a title race.
We are,
and we're building them up before they're ready, probably, to win it.
And the investment is so spectacular, or at least there's been talk of the investment being potentially spectacular.
And I think they've done it. Philip Doherty would not like me saying this, because I don't think the two of them in any way, shape or form equated. They've done it the Newcastle way, as in it's been sensible what they've done in there. They haven't just thrown money around, and Philip Doherty doesn't have the money of the Saudis or the character. Let me be very clear on that.
Yeah, fair enough. What's gone on at Pat's? How have they suddenly become all singing, all dancing?
Again, I think you must mention Tim Clancy's that's his squad. I always feel sorry for the manager in that situation. That's his squad, and there's been some subtle changes, not that many. John Daly's gone in, and there's just been a bit of freedom about them. I think Jamie Lennon has been a huge part of that in midfield for them. Again, I touched on it more about Rovers, but we've got to be careful now in the league where we're sort of a lot of passing and for pass sake, and Jamie Lennon is, although he can certainly pass the ball to a high level, his biggest strength is getting after the ball, and that's sort of number 6, and he's been huge for them. Obviously Chris Forrester's joint top scorer for them, and they've sort of hit form in that centre midfield for them recently. What's been strange about their run at the moment, they've been decimated with injuries, particularly across the back. Like Joe Redmond, their captain, is out long term, and they've lost 3 or 4 centre halves at different stages. So what they've managed to do is remarkable, and it just shows you momentum in football as huge, or whatever the right word is. But all of these teams outside the Rovers wouldn't shock me if they lost 3 games in a row coming up as well. So it's brilliant for them. I hope they think they're in a title race. Are they good enough to win the league? Possibly not, but I hope they have that mindset in the dressing room.
At least tactically, John Daly has shifted a few things and brought a few new initiatives. Like you have the team opener for even Ben McCormick starting at left, but he tucks in quite often in the match as well. So like there's little things that John Daly is doing that you're like, well, that's something that's different.
I will say John Daly tactically has been very impressive throughout his reign. His substitutions at the right time, the way he's matched up. You're right, Ben McCormick has done really well. He's a midfielder playing off the left, and he comes in narrow and gives them that sort of balance in there. And even the other night that allowed Conor Carty, who's a centre forward, effectively play higher on the right wing. So tactically he's made some good things, and it's just a good feel good factor around St. Pat's. I mean, the crowd the other night, exceptional again, great crowds, and things are rolling on nicely for them, and John Daly deserves huge credit for that, have to say. But as I said, some key players are really standing up for them, and things just go your way, and they seem to be at that club. Young Murphy in midfield for them, again, rising player. He's going to be a top player for them. So Sam Curtis, right back, huge interest from English football. I've heard Manchester United now being linked to him, and that's gone back to your point a couple of weeks ago. He would have been in the UK now if he only for the Brexit rules doesn't allow him. So he's now getting men's football week in, week out, and he at 17 he's playing first team football. At 16 he was playing, but I felt he hit a ceiling or a window where I was like, oh, he's probably reached his limit here. He went through a bad spell, but for the last sort of 7, 8, 9 weeks. He's come through that spell and he looks hell of a player, and he's on the radar of a lot of Premiership clubs.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see if anybody can make that leap from a really talented youngster to the Premier League relatively quickly. It massively inflates the transfer value, because the Premier League is clearly a copycat, and if one or two players make it, then all of a sudden transfer fees climb to a point which is transformative.
Well, I don't think you're getting Sam Curtis out of St. Pat's now for less than $250,000 minimum, and it will continue to grow as long as his performance continue to grow and he continues to play that figure. So, you know, the days of 40 and 50,000, there's hopefully there still will be some of them, but he's starting to drift away with a bit of luck.
The FAI plans and their request for investment was published during the week.
Well, it wasn't published, to be fair to them, right? So, and journalists have to do what journalists do, but it was leaked. And what I didn't like about the leak was that, and journalists are entitled to, they stand over them whether they leak stuff and why, but I hope because it's leaked and then when they do announce it hasn't lost some of the weight of their argument, if that makes sense, because it's already out there.
You only get one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah, so that's the only thing. And to make another small point on the FAI, like sometimes even, and I do, we come in here and say the FAI have got to do this, or people say they've got to do that. There is a lot of work going on in the background and they are building strategic plans. I think that announcement is due this Thursday.
Right.
So, or that was their plan, and it's leaked before that. I just hope it's listened to and it's given a fair hearing as a result of. Now, FAI making statements will always make the news, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I think so. I think in politics sometimes the kite gets flown and then the actual ask, and you see what the response is like, and maybe this was on purpose. It was a strategic move to, okay, let's get that story out and let's see what the response is like. If there's a massive outcry to the FAI asking for money from the public, then maybe we'll push that back a month or two, but there hasn't been a massive outcry.
No, and again, I've only seen bits of it. The journalist who released it is behind the paywall. I go behind enough paywalls. I'm not behind that one, so I've only seen bits of it, but it seems to be all of the right soundings. It seems to be huge amount of money they're looking for, fine, but for example 140 million plus for academies, you know, that is needed. League of Ireland teams getting to closer to 20,000 seater stadiums. Not sure whether that's, but hey, what I do hope is they've had an independent company prepare this audit for them, and I do hope though that the standards are high, they stick to them. It seems to be like a 15-year plan but broken into 3-5 year cycles.
Yeah,
and I hope they go after it and actually put people under a little bit of pressure, because you know I know FAI bashing is the easiest thing to do, but I think they've turned a bit of a corner, and
I would say it feels that way, to be honest, that there's a credibility when they go to Leinster House and start lobbying for this, that you know, their recent track record is negotiating their way out of trouble. They haven't been able to do all of the things that they want to do because the senior team hasn't qualified for a tournament and they don't have a sponsor at the moment. That would help, but like, you can't also assume that we're going to qualify for tournaments, because you know, traditionally we don't. Once every 6 or 8 years we might make a Euros, but that's not guaranteed either. So it feels like they've got most of the building blocks in place to run the organisation properly, having come through the storm.
You must give credit to the CEO, Jonathan Hill. I mean, is he out in front of media? Is he, you know, falling out of nightclubs? No, but hey, we probably had a little bit of that now. It's time to have someone a little bit quieter, but certainly doing a lot of work and pushing a lot of people to set new standards and new goals within the FAI. And I think people close to the game will tell you there's a lot of stuff sort of, not that it's happening, but a lot of work on in that, and we should see the fruits of it soon.
Do you feel that?
Genuinely do. I think there's a lot of stuff at the change, and we'll always have problems in politics and sport. There's always a huge thing, and that's never going to go away, but you certainly feel like they're going in the right direction, and it's certainly if you're entitled to a Euro, you'll get the Euro. If you're not entitled to it, it's very hard to go in and say, sure, if we sell 20 tickets, can we have that Euro? So it seems a little bit more straight and there's rules in place. It seems that way. Yeah.
It would be remiss of us not to mention the madness in Turner's Cross for the finale, that Cork Bows game. Just insanity, because Bows equalised, the flares are going off, Bows fans going mad, and in the middle of all that, Daniel Kresic comes up and scores the winner for Cork. Still, Cork aren't in terms of the standings where they want to be, but that was a dramatic one and well earned as well.
No, that was a huge moment for them and for so many other teams as well, because Liam Buckley has gone in as director of football, and they haven't overly changed the squad or anything yet because the windows haven't opened, but there's just seems to be a bit of a feel-good factor around the club at the moment, and Bowles would be bitterly disappointed. Adam McDonald equalised 88 minutes and then boom, 89 minutes, and but that's huge, and the ramifications for that are they were cut adrift a couple of weeks ago, but I think they've won 5 of the last 6 games, and what they've done is now they've put teams like Sligo under pressure. Because when you finish second bottom in the league, you go into a playoff, and traditionally you're playing against a first division team that playing first division football, part-time, etc. The difference now is most likely at the moment it's Waterford, who are a full-time football club, and you've Galway running away with the first division. So if it happens to be Waterford, it's a 50-50 game. It was normally it's 80% 20 nearly for the Premier Division side, so you've got a lot of big clubs watching over the shoulder now, from obviously Drogheda, but Sligo, Shelbourne, all the way up as far as Dundalk, I would say, will have one eye over the shoulder saying got to stay away from that second from bottom position and into the relegation playoff against what looks like a really strong Waterford side.
It's the battle of the midfield, as they call it in Formula 1, those teams that are looking over their shoulder but also ahead of them. Duffer will be pretty pleased with how things are going.
Yeah, again, that was a brilliant result from the other night, because again, I know Duffer will not admit it because he just won't, but they've got to have one eye on Cork as a club, like just continuously building on where they are as a club, and mid-table for Shelbourne and slowly building towards the top is the right plan. But they were losing to Drogheda the other night, and they showed real strength and depth to come back and win the game, and there's a great good factor around that club. Are they easy on the eye? No. Are they hard to watch at times? Yeah, I've been to Shelbourne a lot, but he's getting every single inch out of that group of players. And listen, you have to say that about Duffer, like he's doing the hard yards, and he is managing to get every single last bit of blood out of that stone, and it's tremendous to watch.
Will that impact Duffer? Now I'm talking medium to long term here, but if he ever wanted to get the senior international manager's job, like does the style of play come into it? Will that impact his or harm his chances if he's playing per football to watch?
I think if you're a legend and like Duffer is, I think you would get a pass on that. I don't think what he's doing at Shelbourne will be enough to get him the international job. I think he would have to go to the next level, whether that was with a League of Ireland club and have real success in European football. But what he's doing at Shelbourne is probably not good enough at the moment, but he'll know that himself. But I think being successful in Europe would give him a chance of it, but he'd have to have that, I would feel, to be credible.
Alright, we leave it there for this week. Vinny, good stuff, thanks a million for that. A reminder, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. On Thursday's show, that's tomorrow, Andy Friend, Andy McEntee, London Irish's Hugh O'Sullivan. Right now, Colin Boyle and Darren O'Sullivan from last night's show. We'll see you tomorrow. Best of luck.
Now you're welcome back. So let's talk some GAA. Very happy to say Colin Boyle and Darren O'Sullivan are joining us as the least punitive group stages in world sport are drawing to a close. So in Group 1, to give you the headline news, Mayo are officially qualified. Cork and Kerry are on 2 points. Louth on no points. Gave a decent account of themselves in Castlebar. So Kerry, if they want to top Group 1, they would need Cork to beat Mayo to take top spot. They play Louth, Kerry in the final round. Group 2, Galway already through. Armagh and Tyrone are on 2 points each. Westmeath still on 0 points. Group 3, kind of interesting. Roscommon and Dublin both on 3 points. Kildare and Sligo both on a point each. Now, Dublin play Sligo next. Roscommon play Kildare. There's a very good chance that Kildare and Sligo will both lose, meaning it will come down to points difference. Kildare are a point better off than Sligo as things stand, but it would mean one of the two, Kildare or Sligo, would progress without any wins in Group 3. And then Group 4, Derry and Monaghan on 3 points, Donegal on 2 points, and then Clare no points. Clare officially out. So Derry, Monaghan 3 points, and Donegal 2 points is where we are. Colin Boyle and Darren O'Sullivan, like I said, are with us. There was a degree, Colin, where I think most people's instinct at the outset of these group stages was that 3 from 4 was a little too generous, but let's see how it all plays out. I think in a bid to avoid dead rubbers at all costs, we have created a kind of limbo which is just not capturing the imagination.
No, 100% Joe, and I think it's highlighted by the fact that Kildare or Sligo, there's a possibility they're going to get out of the group, as you mentioned there, with 2 defeats and a draw, which is ridiculous, really. So it's not capturing the imagination for a couple of reasons, really. I think people are still trying to figure this format out. I think the quality of the football and the fare that's been on offer has been so poor, even though, to be fair, there were some decent games at the weekend, but I think overall it's been really, really poor. People are putting the low crowds at the weekend down to the weather. Maybe that was a factor as well. Like I was in Castlebar on Sunday, Joe, at the Mayo Louth game, and like Mayo's home support is normally really, really good. And I think the Mayo Galway game on the 29th of January, there was over 14,000 people at it. That's a league game on a Saturday night in January. Last Sunday, championship game, which is effectively a game to try and get you through to a quarter final, there was 11,500 people there. So something's not quite right there. And I know people are saying the weather, other things for doing bank holiday weekend, and yes, you factor all that in, but I think when you go around the country and around the grounds, you know what I mean, a lot of empty seats, a lot of empty stadiums, and it leads to poor atmosphere, poor games, and we're getting an awful lot of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Like, I think, Darren, the GA were burned by the Super 8s, and there are, John Fogarty, for instance, reminded me in 18 and in 19, Dublin won their first 2 games, and then they put out effectively second string sides against Roscommon and Tyrone. So it's like they really got it into their minds, don't want dead rubbers. And so the headline news ahead of the final round is, 15 of 16 teams are still alive, and they are, like, in theory, but they're not really. I mean, Louth will have to beat Kerry at a neutral venue. I don't know if that's capturing the imagination realistically. Westmeath will have to go and beat Tyrone again. I don't think that's really capturing people. Kildare, Sligo potentially through with 1 point and 2 defeats doesn't feel right. And then in Group 4, Clare are out already, so we have kind of a dead rubber in a sense there. There's nothing to play for, whereas if it was only 2 through from Group 4, you'd effectively have a knockout game between Donegal and Monaghan this weekend. Instead, Clare are out. It's just a bit of jostling for position. So like this kind of 15 of 16 still in it, everything is still to play for selling point. It feels like fairly hollow PR next to the reality.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. Look, I suppose with the new format, it was always going to be a bit of trial and error. Probably a bit more error this year. But yeah, like you said, if there was only 2 to go through, it leaves an awful lot to play for. All of a sudden, Kerry's game against Cork the weekend, there's even more pressure on that. Whether they can change it for next year, I don't know. There's so many changes every year that comes in, it's hard to keep track of. But a lot of it is just tweaks. All of a sudden, the Super 8 actually seems very appealing, and that got enough abuse. But yeah, like, it is a small tweak. If it was only 2 teams to go through, all of a sudden there's some great games. And look, that's what it's all about. I suppose we wanted more games, but there's probably too many games, and like you said, too many games that were pretty much meaningless. So look, it is a bit of tweaking. We won't go too mad about it, because look, we've been crying out for change. They were never going to get it right initially, and that's what it's about. It's about a bit of trial and error. We want all these games. The players want the games, but next year it'll be about making it a bit more cutthroat, I suppose, and making more of the games meaningful.
Yeah, like, I've seen the argument Colin made, and I do get the logic that 3 from 4 going through, it will pretty much ensure that all, the big teams, they won't get caught out in the hop. They'll make it through. We'll have a fairly stacked quarter final, which will really look great on paper, and that's a fair argument. I suppose there's a degree here of, we really are eating all our vegetables first here. I just wouldn't mind a bit of salt on things. I don't mind 1 or 2 big names going out early if it gives a bit of juice to May or June,
And Joe, look, we spoke about this last week. This is exactly what the championship needs. It almost needs a bit of life thrown into it by a big team going out of it. And it would be great if that was in 2 weeks' time, you know, because a lot of the football has been so passive, and I think it's been passive because teams are just, not saying they're not going for the course they are, but it's not do or die. It's not cutthroat, and that's why we're seeing so much pedestrian style football. I think, like Darren said, the counter argument that is, I suppose, Darren mentioned Cork and Kerry there, like, the way this system is, it's almost bulletproof for the top 6 or 7 teams to get to a quarter final, and it's so difficult for the likes of a Cork. Like, Cork bet Louth on the first day. They could have beaten Kerry and Páirc Uí Chaoimh last Saturday, which would have been a huge result, and it still might only get them into a playoff because if Mayo bet them in the last weekend. So there's something not right with that either. It's very hard for a team like Cork to make a breakthrough as well. So I think there's a balance to that, and it works both ways.
Let's pick our way through some of the games. You mentioned you were at Castlebar, Colin, for Mayo, 14 points, Louth 110. This game was on TV, so I suspect plenty of people have seen it. Louth scored a late goal and a point to sharpen up the scoreboard. And for a moment, I think even in commentary, the thought was they'd equalise, but there was a mistake on the scoreboard. So it turned out they got to within a point. So Louth gave very decent account of themselves. We're back, Colin, to the conversation we had after Mayo's defeat to Roscommon. They, of the top teams, have a problem of sorts. How great it is, I don't know. We can tease that out now, but they certainly don't love breaking down a blanket defence. No, Joe. We'll probably as well get this one out of the way first. It was the Gaelic football version of the Europa League final last week between Roma and Sevilla, and Mickey Hart was certainly Jose Mourinho in this case. It was dour stuff. Yeah. But look, Louth did what they had to do. They came to McHale Park with a game plan around containment, frustrating Mayo, staying in the game for as long as they could, and possibly coming at the end to maybe take the game or steal the game. And they almost did it, to their credit. You know, you mentioned Mayo not being able to break them down, and they weren't for long spells. But to be honest, on the 73rd minute, Joe, Mayo were 14-9 up. And I think if that game finishes 14-9 and they don't concede 1-1 in the last 90 seconds, or minute, I think people's perception of the game might be slightly different, and they might say, look, it was awful stuff to watch. Mayo did what they had to do. They won it comfortably for a finish. They pulled away when it mattered. Job done, away you go. But then they concede that 1-1, and I think people are thinking a small bit different about Mayo now at the minute, which is fine. I don't think Kevin McStay be overly worried about that. But they did, there's no doubt about it, find it hard to break Louth down, and you could visibly see there was frustration in the players' faces. There was actually frustration on the sideline as well. Kevin McStay, who's normally very cool, there was Jack Carney had a shot one time from a mark that I thought it looked wide, but McStay was adamant that it was over, and he was really going for it with the linesman. I think that was just a symbol of the frustration of the day and not being able to break Louth down. The key thing for me, I think Mayo all week would have spoken about getting out of the blocks early, a fast start, get out in front of Louth, don't give them a chance to breathe, and they do that. They're 3 points, they're 3-0 up after 5 minutes, but they only score 4 points then for the rest of the half, and Louth really get set in their defensive structure, and Mayo never really were able to get their shooters on the ball, the Ryan O'Donoghu's, the James Carr, Aidan O'Shea's around the D, or myself and Darren were speaking beforehand, shooting over that press and getting scores from 45 metres out the way. Mayo never really tried any of those efforts, and they were never chipping away at the scoreboard. Everything was always really, really hard work, and the scores were hard to come by, and that's why it left it so tight at the end. And Louth had a massive goal chance, Joe, at the start of the second half by Leonard Gray. If that goes in, because McHale Park was already getting edgy at this stage, if that goes in, it's a huge moment. It's a brilliant ball over the top by Liam Jackson to Leonard Gray. Colin Reid hesitates, then comes for it, and ends up making a big save, put it off the bar. If that had gone in, it would have been a really nervy second half for Mayo. In the end, it was a win, but look, if you're Kevin McStay, you would have taken 2 wins from 2, and on you go to the Cork game, chance to win it now to be guaranteed a quarter final. Yeah, because in Monaghan Clare, actually, we saw lots of great long range scoring, and I would have thought conditions would have allowed for it, but my defining memory, Darren, of the game is Mayo extremely lateral.
Yeah, and like Colin mentioned, the atmosphere, and that seeps into the players too. When you can feel the crowd getting antsy, sometimes there's that bit of fear that you don't want to go for the long distance point because all you get is the groan, the disappointment. And the lateral football at the moment, we won't drag it out too much, but that's what it is. People are afraid to take the chance, and the pace goes out of the game. Once you take the pace out of the game, it's very easy to defend against, and you need fellas coming off the shoulder. Obviously, you have to do that smart. If there's so many bodies in front of you, you can't do it. But you're seeing it more and more often in most games where teams are probably prepared for what they're going to come up against, that they know they have to get their kickers into that quarterback position, coming out, kicking over the press. Obviously, when you get it, it's brilliant. They start pushing out that bit more, spaces open up. But if they start drifting wide, the crowd get more antsy. Players get a bit more nervous. They don't want to be the one kicking it, and it just gives more energy to the opposition. So, look, it is something I think a lot of teams will be working on. But as myself and Colin were saying off air, I think once you get to Croke Park and you get to some of the bigger teams, that will go out the window a small bit. There'll be less fear. I think teams will be concentrating more on their own job and less of this blanket defence or deep defending. A lot harder to do that in Croke Park as well. So I think that'll bring it out. But obviously, if you can get a couple of shooters on the ball early days, kick it over the press, it kind of reduces that straight away because the team has to push out and has to attack.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there are a few ways to beat a blanket defence, and we'll come to Derry in a moment. They have a whole range of options, it seems. But Colm, yourself or Lee Keegan, you could beat a man, a bit of pace, that would help. It was interesting, you wouldn't have heard it really, Colm, if you were at the game, but Paul Flynn was on commentary in RTE, and I think, inadvertently he was just giving us the Dublin method to break down a blanket, and in effect it was, he was almost saying, this is pretty simple, this shouldn't be that complicated. He was saying, in effect, you go down one touchline, you take a bunch of opposition defenders, you suck them in, invariably they'll come over, and then pretty quickly spread the play black out. You got runners coming through the middle, shooting through, and you either keep switching play or one of the runners will pick it off and come through with a bit of pace, and he's, like he said, almost mathematically, you will get a shot off. Like it's just a matter of time, and it won't take overly long. Whereas Mayo were just back and forth at a very slow pace. So I don't know, Flynn and Dublin have done it for years, so that struck me as advice worth heeding. I couldn't see an obvious method in Mayo. I couldn't see this is the pattern that they're definitely trying to break Louth down with.
No, from being at the game, Joe, I think what you're saying is right. They never really looked to probe them corners, come back around and move it to the other side. What they were doing an awful lot was their half-back line, their midfielders would actually end up being their furthest men forward. They were trying to drag the Louth blanket back towards their own goal and try and create a bit of space for a shooter around the D, but it wasn't really happening. I think the only really time it was successful was Stephen Cohen actually made a run for the D. He was being tracked, he comes back around and ends up showing for the ball himself and getting a mark at the end of the first half and kicking it over the bar. But that was the only really time that worked. Everything else was slow and predictable. And you mentioned about pace there from the half-back line. I was surprised, and obviously you don't know what's going on with injuries, but I was surprised Paddy Durkin didn't start and Enda Hession didn't start for them two exact reasons that you're talking about, because they would inject that pace from the back, from the middle of third. And all you need is for a couple of line breaks like that, and suddenly things open up for you and it becomes a lot more difficult for the opposition. So I think going forward, I think that's certainly an area Mayo be looking at. They need to be injecting that pace, but certainly moving the ball quicker as well.
Yeah. I know, Darren, I agree with you. We don't want to drag it out too much, but the style of play that we're seeing at the moment, I watched this Mayo Louth game, it was just painful. It just is. And no one can tell me it's intriguing or fascinating or tactical. It's just really slow. And if you think even tiki-taka at its worst, at least a ball being passed along the ground 5-10 yards, there's a bit of zip to that, and there's a creation of angles, there's a bit of something going on. Whereas in GAA, it is just a player in possession trotting 10 metres and then his opposite or his teammate jogging the opposite way, and he might pop it to him, and he trots another 15 metres. And I mean, I don't know, some people listen to their podcast at 1.5 speed. Like, that's the only way to watch some of this. I saw Colin Collins, he was saying what we need to address is these long periods where possession has been held. If we can address that, we still have a fine product. I'm not the smartest man in this area. Something like a shot clock, maybe. That was Colin Collins, a manager. That was just one suggestion. I don't know what the answer is, but like, players are too skillful, they're too organised now, they've too much composure, they respect possession. Like, this problem's here to stay, and I think the rule makers may have to jump in here.
Yeah, I think so, but I think when you're describing any game as intriguing or tactical, that's another way of saying it was boring.
That's what I mean. I'm not swallowing that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'll listen to a political discussion that's intriguing.
Yeah. No, like, I think he's right. Like, I'd probably be drawing the same line as he is. I don't have the answer, because I suppose teams are doing nothing wrong, and the way they see it is possession is key, and eventually a team will have to come up, but it is boring. It's like, I watched 3 games on Saturday and the Saturday game, and I was worn out from you. I played in the games. I was exhausted from watching it. But it's boring. Yeah. And players are very athletic. They'll do that all day. They're very comfortable on the ball. But they do need to change something. They're on with all these rule changes. It has to be something that a shot clock, or if you go over the halfway line, you can't go back, like in basketball or whatever it is. But if you don't bring pace to the game, as Conor was saying about the lads Durkin and Hessian coming on and pace, you're going nowhere. And it's the easiest thing in the world to defend against. And all it takes is one person to have a bit of bravery, try and break the line, come at pace, and somebody come off the shoulder. It sounds simple, as Paul Flynn was making it sound, but you have to take a chance. You have to be brave with it. I just think fellas are so obsessed with possession and stats and not having turnovers next to their name. There's a fear there. I don't want to be the one to lose the ball. I don't want to be the one having a wide from 40 yards and think I wasted possession. We're starting again. But like, all the tactics in the world, I just like a bit of off the cuff football. Go on gut, go on feeling. And it sounds a bit simple and basic and old school or whatever, like, but you have to change something, because it is like, you could watch a fella go over 5 yards, hand pass over to the sideline, back over again, and it's so one pace,
and under no pressure as well. Under no pressure,
because the defensive team are thinking, this is great, we'll save our energy here, I'll trot 5 yards over, my man will trot 5 yards over, and it's, I don't know, it's like doing a bit of a dance in front of each other, really.
I think and I agree, lads, I think something needs to be done, but I think whatever it is, it has to be very, very, we have to be careful with it, because we have to consider the club game as well, and how a referee is going to manage at club level with the shot clock. Like, it'd be impossible, really.
You, I presume neither of you, Colin, you can go for. You would never advocate different rules at intercounty and club level. That's like the ethos of the GA, completely ruined if you did go down that route.
Yeah, I suppose you could, Joe. You could, but I don't think would it be sustainable. I don't know. Obviously, shot clock, you get away with it at intercounty level. You get away with holding a certain amount of players in the one half at intercounty level, because everyone is mic'd up. There's absolutely no way that would work at club level. It'd be chaos at club championship game in that way. So maybe that could be a solution. Maybe you introduce different rules for intercounty and club. But look, that's far from ideal either. Let's be honest.
That'd be a very sad move to have to make.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. It'd be terrible. I think Darren's point and your point, Joe, and everything being so safe. It's almost like players, coaches are mic'd up to them and they're talking them through each play. Pass it to the man beside you and move. You know what I mean? It's almost like the coaching is just unbelievable, and the lack of risk is unbelievable in a lot of games. Hopefully, Joe, when the jeopardy comes in, maybe things might change slightly, and there will be a few more risks taken later on in the championship.
Yeah, and this, by the way, I should emphasise, and I presume I'm speaking for both of you as well, this is not to denigrate the players, and like, their fitness levels are off the charts. They're playing in 25 degrees heat over the weekend. The commitment is there. They're training all year round. They are doing, like Louth, for instance. This is not about Louth. They are doing what they have to do to be competitive, and they were competitive. We're just talking about the overall product, which is not working. I don't know. I like if we're at a point where we're saying, well, these group stages aren't great now, but it'll be good when we get to Croke Park, and you're saying, well, the football's not great now, but like we'll get some more risk taken when we get to Croke Park. Like at a certain point, Darren, I want to start living life today. It was June, it was sunny, there was football on. Why can't it be a bit better today?
I know, like you actually cry out for days like that when you're playing. Like the game is normally electric, quick. It's like the pace goes up when the sun comes out. But I like it's not a criticism of players anyway, because the players have never been better, like fitness wise, just unbelievable. But I always go back to it, and I always get a bit of abuse on Twitter after about stats. I just think too much information. Genuinely, I think fellas have too much information. You've ran X amount of K, you had this amount of touches, you lost this amount of, oh Jesus. Like you open their local newspaper and it's going through every player individually. He had this amount of touches, this amount of kicks, this amount of hand passes, he had this amount of turnovers, this amount of wides. Like I know people say they don't read the stuff, they don't look at it, but it's that training as well. And I just think the more information you have, the more you think about stuff. And I would have always felt more comfortable on the field. Obviously, the tactics and stuff, but play it as you see it. And I think Colin was saying there, it is like players, they hear this stuff so often. It actually is like they're coaching through the game.
Yeah, and I know, I totally agree, because I wouldn't blame the defending team here. It's the attacking team. I even feel now, Darren, when say there's a turnover and there's like the sniff of a counter-attack, and maybe we can segue into Derry in a moment, because they will have a counter-attack, but I feel even too often, Darren, there's like a turnover and possession is won, and instead of like the team that have just won the ball saying, right, let's have a crack here, it's like the instinct is now, it's so embedded, I'm going to circle back and I'm going to fist it backwards, and we're going to get set again, and we're going to start over. And like that's heartbreaking. Like I don't know, it can't be the right thing to do every time.
No, but like that, at least if there was a turnover in that sense, and let's say Loud, for example, took off, there's a bit of a buzz there's a bit of panic, there's a bit of emotion, there's a bit of excitement. Whereas if they turn it over, there's a mistake by Meyler or whatever it is, and it's just, all right, they have a note, slowly does it.
But what's funny, right, about that point, and this maybe is where we get back to the rules that have to be changed, because even at half time, the analysis allowed was once or twice they had a turnover, and then it was highlighted that a whole bunch of their players started sprinting forwards, and the point was made, now if you're turned over, nobody's at home and Mayo are in for a goal. And that happened to them against Dublin off a kick out or two, where a couple of loud players bombed on, they lost the kick out, and suddenly Dublin were in. So like the coaching advice there increasingly is going to be, here, listen, don't bomb on, stay back. That's why I just feel like there's going to have to be some rule change of some sort. I just don't know what it is.
And that actually happened, Joe, twice against Mayo. Mayo turned them over around the middle of the pitch, and that was the only real goal chances Mayo had, because Louth were wide open. So that's an interesting one as well, that the couple of times where they actually did take off and take a couple of risks, they actually got 2 goal chances out of it, or conceded 2 goal chances.
Because what they're doing isn't wrong. It's like a failure of teams to break them down, I suppose, is the problem. But I also appreciate it's hard to break it down.
Yeah, and just it came into my head when you were talking there, lads, about turnovers, and I always think of Donegal 2012. Like when they, and this from playing against them, when they made a turnover back in your forward line, their defence, there was almost like a score in the crowd. The buzz, the energy, the cheer it got, and the pace that team broke at. Like that team gets labelled as being very defensive, and Jim McGuinness gets a bit of criticism still now about it. But the pace they broke at was sensational, and the buzz and the energy. You see very little of that now. It's very much turnover, controlled. Let your players get up the pitch, a la Derry probably last year and this year. Let all your players get up the pitch. We'll hold the ball back here till they get up, and now we'll all go and attack. Yeah.
Final word to you on this, Darren, then we'll get talking about some of those other matches in a bit more depth.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a fear thing. Like my thing was always fortune favours the brave. But if you're too brave, the stats won't look too kindly maybe on you. But look, Louth will come away from the game saying we lost to Mayo. Mayo won the favourites to All-Ireland. We lost by a point. That's progress. You have to play to your strength. They probably think we're not far enough along the road to compete with this Mayo team. We don't care what anyone says about us. And I can totally understand that. Teams have to do what suits them. and probably this time next year they might have evolved as Donegal did back 10 plus years ago. They weren't very appealing the first year, and they kicked it on the second year. I suppose you have to get your house in order before you can concentrate on the forward side of things. But look, it's a common theme. But as Paul Flynn said, it is about moving. But I genuinely think you would break any structure down if you add pace. You need pace, you need runners. Even if I made a run off Cullum and I didn't get it, I'm drawing eyes to me, which are going away from other players. So it is about just adding pace to the game. If you go back and forth in this one pace slowly across the field, it doesn't matter if it's their first time on a football field, it'll be easy to defend against. But you add pace to something, all of a sudden there's a bit of worry. One player switches off for a second, but if you're keeping it too safe, it's just going to bore the life out of everyone.
I have images of you staring into space on your couch over the weekend, wondering what's it all about.
Well, it was actually worse. If I stared into space, it'd be grand. I was actually watching the cameras from the bar because I wasn't working on Saturday, so that was more entertaining.
We'll take a break and then we'll get into some of the games in a bit more detail. We're talking to Darren O'Sullivan and Colin Boyle. Gaelic Football on Off the Ball is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. You can check out #TheTovers for more. Back in just one moment.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Off the Ball